Council historically begins its session with an invocation offered by one of the religious leaders of our community with full appreciation of our shared belief that we are one nation under God. And while the city cannot endorse any particular religion, we respect the religious freedom and freedom of expression of all our citizens to pray as they feel led to pray. This evening's invocation will be given by Mark Browd of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
No?
Okay.
Okay, Tim's going to jump in, and then after that, please remain standing. Mayor Pro Tem Baker will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to be gathered together today as citizens of this wonderful community. We are thankful for the opportunity to participate in this democratic process. We are grateful for the opportunity we have to choose our direction, to be able to choose our leaders, and to be able to choose what type of town we want to live in. We thank Thee for all that Thou hast given us, and we ask that Thy wisdom be upon us, and we may be able to make decisions that are that are best for our residents and best for our families. We ask that Thy blessings be upon all of those members of our military service and public safety, those of service and public safety, that they will be blessed in their service and that they will be protected and cared for. And ultimately, we also ask a blessing upon all of those that are struggling in our community, that they will be blessed with health, with assistance, and with the love that they require. We ask these blessings in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Please face the flag and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tim, thanks for stepping in. Ladies and gentlemen, sorry that we were late. We had a pressing matter we had to get to, so hopefully didn't push anybody's timelines too far back.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Donchak. Councilmember Ward. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Baker.
Here.
And Mayor Ham.
Here.
First item on the agenda is presentation of a proclamation to Janet Dunford, Crime Prevention Specialist, setting apart February 3rd through the 16th as Blue Ribbon Activities Days.
Assistance? We have a lot of assistance. There's a bunch of stuff on this whereas, and I don't like reading the whereases, so if you would like to step up and say something about Blue Ribbon, that'd be fantastic.
Okay, all right, yeah, I sure can. All right, thank you so much for having us, and we appreciate our students and Michael Halt, the principal of San Clemente High School. So I just want to give you a little bit of information about what Blue Ribbon is all about. The City of San Clemente and Orange County Sheriff's Department is a proud sponsor of San Clemente family of PTA's Blue Ribbon Week Kindness Counts observed in schools. Now celebrating its 5th year in San Clemente, Kindness Counts, SC Counts, which I have a little blue band on, provides for a variety of programs that promote kindness, compassion, friendship, dealing with social drama, and bullying awareness, while empowering youth to handle social situations in a positive manner. A banner is over El Camino Real, recognizing kindness counts and Blue Ribbon for 2 weeks. Blue ribbons on Del Mar are tied on the lampposts. Thank you, parents and students, for your help right here doing that. Several presentations will be made on San Clemente campuses. The presentations identify signs of bullying and ways to prevent and mitigate bullying. Crime prevention and deputies will visit the schools at morning flag salutes, lunchtime activities, and presentations. We welcome the City Council. If any of you would like to join us, just give me a call and I'll tell you what's going on each day. For the 4th year, Dawn Camber, news director with KSBR 88.5 radio station, aired a panel discussion on anti-bullying and kindness counts. So now I will ask San Clemente High School Principal Hall to come up and talk a little bit and introduce your students.
Absolutely. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Mayor.
Good to see you, Principal.
Members of the City Council, I appreciate you having us here today. And members of the community, I truly appreciate it. It's an honor to be able to serve you as the principal of San Clemente High School. With me today are 5 of our students who represent the more than 100 students who are members of CGBK, or Cool to Be Kind. It's a student-led organization that. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's on.
It's a student-led organization that's designed to promote a campus and a culture that is inclusive, that promotes, as it says, kindness, and making sure that we're breaking down those barriers that make people feel isolated or excluded. And we know that the best anti-bullying program at the high school level really is one that promotes kindness and inclusiveness. I'd like to introduce just briefly Skylar, Brennan, Liam, and Kasha, and have Kasha come forward and sort of talk to you about some of the activities that were going on this week. You may have noticed the blue ribbons that adorn Del Mar and the high school campus. This weekend, the Kasha and company and about 100 kids came to the high school and throughout the community to tie up those blue ribbons to help remind all of us the importance of taking a moment to extend some kindness, to give a pleasant smile, a warm greeting, and not just to the people you know, but to people who you don't know, those people who may look down and may need that little bit of extra attention and kindness. And then Kasha will tell you a little about some of the other things that are going on this week.
We have several activities that we're going to be having through Cool to Be Kind at San Clemente High School and around for the next couple of weeks. This Thursday, blue bracelets for Blue Ribbon Week will be handed out to all the students at San Clemente at the high school. On Friday, we'll be having a compliment wall where students can compliment each other anonymously, like at lunch. And next Monday, Ms. Mendez will be having a parent meeting that will address bullying, and everybody is invited to come next Monday. And then next Wednesday, a Holocaust survivor will actually be coming to our school to talk to us about bullying and the meaning of Blue Ribbon Week itself. Thank you.
Well, I think we were supposed to give this to you, Janet, but should we present it to the principals and see too?
Sure.
So here's a proclamation from the city of San Clemente, just stating everything that you guys said. So thank you very much. Thanks for coming out this evening, guys. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you guys soon.
Thank you.
Yep. Have a good evening.
Next is presentation by Andrew Kanzler, Water Conservation Analyst, concerning the current state of water resources and conservation efforts in the city.
Hey, Andrew, what's on your face, bro?
A little dirt.
Yeah, what is that? Is that to conserve water so you don't have to shave? Is that what you're doing?
That is
That's
why,
that's
yeah.
really wise. Well done. Well played, sir. Tim, this is anti-bullying week. If you could stop bullying the staff, I think we'd appreciate it. I should wear a blue ribbon as my penance for that.
We got a blue tie, so that's close. All right, so good evening, council. Just to give you a recap of our last fiscal year. So City of San Clemente services 51,000 people. Talega is serviced by Santa Margarita Water Districts. We serve 9,700 acre feet of water. 570 acre feet of water was recycled water. So 94% of our water is imported water, which is a high amount. Governor declared a drought last year, and these are some of the drought responses that our wholesale agency went through and what we did. We declared a drought stage 1 in August, and Met and MODOC are developing allocation plans, and we will find out if we will go into allocations around March. San Clemente's potential allocation is 8,600 acre feet, and if you remember, 9,700 was how much we used the previous year. So that's about 1,000 acre feet we'd have to reduce.
Andrew, let me stop you right there.
Sure.
How did you find out what the potential allocation is?
This is based off of Municipal Water District of Orange County's their allocation plan. So they're developing the allocation plan now, and I go to those meetings and get some updates from them. It's about a 10% reduction. So everyone that has imported water is going to see about a 10% reduction from imported water.
So the proposed allocation plan is a reduction of 10%, is that
Yeah,
correct?
It's around 10%, give or take.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm sorry, in an allocation, are you going to speak a little bit about what allocation plan entails or how that works?
The allocation plan is pretty in-depth, so I can come back to you with some more details on that.
Okay.
But I'm
Okay, if
for
you
this
could just
presentation, yeah.
circulate the council, I'm kind of curious about how that functions. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is where our water comes from, two places, State Water Project and the Colorado River Aqueduct. So Northern California and east. And this indicates how much water there was in the Sierra Nevadas, which is where our water comes from. That blue line there is our current water. The yellow line is the average line. We're floating around average right now. Last year is that red line there. It was pretty dry. We're looking like the last line right there. December we had a lot of good water, but January's been pretty flat. We haven't seen much water in January, so that's some bad news. So our allocation from the State Water Project last year was the lowest we've ever received, which is 5%. Our current allocation is 15%. If we get to 45%, that's a break-even point. If we do see a normal average water, we could see 45% allocation. So we're kind of hoping and praying that we get a normal water year in the Sierra Nevadas. Colorado River, even though we're seeing normal rainfall in Colorado River this year and last year, the basin still continues to go down. Unless we see a good, strong, wet year like we did in 2010-11, then it won't go back up significantly. Our Metropolitan Water District, this is where we get all imported water from. Their storage has gone down. It's down to about 2008, 2009 levels. Back then we had the economic downturn, which a lot of people stopped using a lot of water. We don't have an economic downturn this year, so it's a little bit different. So if we want to conserve water, these are places people can visit to find water rebates. So $2 a square foot. It's an all-time high for turf removal, so if you want to take advantage of it, now's the time to do that. Some other rebates there. And if you have any questions, you can email me or call me directly.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Okay.
I have one. Andrew, I noticed that $2 a square foot for turf removal. Mm-hmm. Now, if a homeowner wanted to replace his yard with, how would he go about taking advantage of that? Would you give us a scenario?
The best thing to do is to make sure you apply first. A lot of people will forget that and they start the project and then they apply afterwards. Definitely apply first. Go to this website, mwdoc.com, the rebates. Apply, and then someone will call you, set up an inspection time, and they'll come out and see that you have turf to remove because we just don't want anybody taking advantage of the program. And then after they take a look at that, they measure your landscape, then you can begin the work, take out the turf, put something else back in, and then there's a post-inspection, which will measure how much turf you actually did take out, and then a check is cut to you afterwards.
Okay, and we have currently on the consent calendar this evening, we have a large turf removal plan for the city of San Clemente. So any residents that are interested in this can look on the agenda and see all the things that the city is. Well, you know what? I think I'll pull that. Maybe you can talk about that for a minute. How about that, Andrew? Yeah. All right. We'll talk about this some more in a minute.
Okay, sure.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right, thank you.
Great beard, by the way. Don't listen to Tim. Keep up the good work.
Are you bullying me
I
now?
am bullying
Yeah,
you.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
Members of the audience who wish to address council on matters that are within the jurisdiction of the City of San Clemente, but not separately listed on the agenda, may do so during the oral communications portion of the meeting. A total time limitation of 30 minutes is allocated for oral communications, Part 1, with each speaker being allotted 3 minutes in which to give his or her presentation. And I do have some cards.
Before we start taking speakers, I just want to point out a couple things with our podium here. We have a green light, a yellow light, and a red light, and they'll indicate how much time you have left. We've been going over and being polite about it, but we have lots of cards this evening, so we're going to stick to 3 minutes exactly. So if you see that red light go and you hear a buzzer, finish your sentence. 30 minutes or just 3 minutes? 30 minutes. We're going to be below 30 minutes, I think. So our first person up this evening is going to be Michael Moniak. Followed Michael will be Anthony Nefrano and Sharon Gonzalez. Hi, Michael.
Hi. There we go. Council members, thanks for your time on this. I live at 264 Delgado Road. My name is Michael Moniak. And the picture I have in front of you is the hillside, Calle Vista, which is right above the Shortfoot Golf Course. The area in yellow is my complex where I live. And the point of that yellow is that was a man-made hillside in 1963 by backfill. There was originally the Delgado Creek that came through the complex, and they backfilled. It was legal, permitted, non-conforming. The main problem with that is water from the houses above is coming down onto the city property. Reason I'm here is the HOA in 2009 installed some storm drains. They didn't pull permits, it's not up to code. This is not gonna cost the city any money. I have no problems with the city-owned hillside. That's not the issue, that's fine. It's the drains they installed at the top of the hillside on HOA property that are not conforming. And I've been trying to get answers to why permits aren't required. And I keep getting back from the city, and I apologize, Mr. City Manager, this is before your time, that we're aware of it and we're looking into it. We'll keep an eye on it. It's gotten worse. This is my next door neighbor at 266 Delgado, and this is the drain at the top of the hill that, and the main picture's on the left, the zoomed in on the top right, that shows an open drain onto the hillside. And we're within like a half mile of the ocean. I think that's part of the California Coastal Commission, but that's what I'm talking about is not permitted and is not up to code. Here's one of the ones from 2009 that was installed, that the dirt around the drains, it's not up to code, you know, as far as this is not, and you can see down below is the street. Here's behind my house, and in January 2014, they made modifications. Code says you have to, you know, if you modify more than 10 feet, you have to get a permit. Here's the main thing. The red line is the line for where the city property begins. The yellow line's my property. This is clearly HOA private property. Here's the area where the drains were installed, and the kicker is that dot on there is where the storm drain is, and the HOA contractor didn't use the storm drain. He went around back into the parking lot, so he didn't have to pull permits. When I asked him why didn't you use storm drain, he goes, it wasn't feasible. Well, that's a nice way of saying they didn't want to pull permits and bring it. This is the damage that has already occurred in 2010 from when the drains, when water's going across dirt, there's a large hole in the top left that from my neighbor next door created. We called the engineering department, they kind of scratched their head, they said, we don't know anything about the permit. This is how they fixed it, you know, as far as going there. So in conclusion, yes, I've researched all the code, you have to have permits, you know, the building code's very clear. And I just want an answer from the city as far as why. Normally the city, most cities want permits for everything. And if it's not gonna be required a permit, they have a written exception. Why no permits for these?
Michael, this looks like a pretty complicated issue. If you contact City Hall and set up a time, you can meet with me and we'll have staff there and we'll discuss it.
Mr. Brown, when he was mayor, I've met with the assistant city manager. I talked to the Orange County District Attorney because if the city's not following the laws, you file a claim with the DA's office. He called I'm not sure which attorney he talked to, but he said that basically it's private property, city has minimal liability if the house falls down.
Well, we can't solve this problem sitting up here, so if you can contact me then.
Look at the pictures.
Yep.
I will call you.
Okay.
I'd just like to get this thing permitted.
Thank you, sir.
With the rains, it's getting really bad.
Understandable. Mr. Lafrano, and then following Mr. Lafrano will be Sharon Gonzalez.
Good evening. It's a small town. The wave pool apparently was canceled in October. The leasee could not fulfill the obligations of the contract, and therefore the city council canceled the wave pool. I read that tonight you're in discussions, in closed session again, to revive this project. My question is why? It was a bad project to begin with. It's a bad project now. We're in a drought. We don't need a wave pool when we've got waves 2 minutes down the road. It is a bad project. Do wave pools make money? Does miniature golf make money? Do restaurants make money? Restaurants barely make money. And the question that each and every one of you should ask yourselves is, would I invest $50,000 of my own money in this project? And if the answer is no, then you scrap it, you don't do it, because it's a bad project. The other thing that concerns me is that there was absolutely zero due diligence done on the previous lessees in terms of background check, credit check, work reference check, history check. I would suggest to you that next time you enter into a revenue sharing arrangement with any individual, they undergo a full FBI background check. That's a kids park up there. How do you know that they weren't a child molester? Because you guys didn't run the background checks. And now those individuals are being sued for fraud and breach of contract because of their mishandling of the funds that they were supposed to use to build the wave pool. So the takeaway is this: please, let's get a due diligence committee in place so that this doesn't happen again. This is a city, this is a business. You guys need to run it like a business. You need to have the systems in place so that when you do enter an agreement with someone, you know that they've got a balance sheet that can basically get the project done. The other thing is that if you guys want to make money with that piece of property up there, then go all in. Go a full liquor license, get a qualified leasee in there that does business in the, put a Hooters up there. That's going to make money. But don't just have a restaurant with a 2-drink maximum. It's not going to make money. It's a bad project. I got involved with City Council once I discovered that City Council voted to sell alcohol up at that project. If this does come up again, please ask yourselves 2 questions. Number 1, would you invest $50,000 of your own money in that project? And number 2, do you really want our children go up there on a Sunday to play soccer with people drinking right across the parking lot? I don't care if it's a 2-drink maximum. That's still enough to intoxicate a 19-year-old, a 22-year-old female that weighs 105 pounds. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Anthony. Sharon Gomez, then following Sharon will be Colin LeClaire, Warren Vidrine, and Laurel Clement. What? Sharon Gonzalez, Colin LeClaire. Are you Sharon?
Gomez, yes, but I'm Gonzalez.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I'm not a very good reader, apparently. Okay. Hi, Sharon. How are you?
Okay, hi. I am here in support of the Saddleback Memorial Care Urgent Care Outpatient Center. I'm the president of the Assistance League of Capistrano Valley here in town, and we had the pleasure of listening to Tony Struthers, and he gave us figures, numbers. I'm not a numbers person, but I did understand these numbers. 7 emergencies, true emergencies a day, 15 surgeries in a month. That's not enough for a hospital to stay open. So I'm going to make this very short, and I'm just going to say I'm in full support of this advanced, cutting-edge, state-of-the-art urgent care center proposed by them, and simply for a few reasons, because I want the best. I want the best specialists living here and working here. I want to be able to go close to home and see these specialists. I want the best lower prices rather than going to a hospital and paying those prices. I want the outpatient prices. And I want the best facility that we can have close to home. This is just an amazing creation that they've come up with, this proposal. And so I'm hoping that San Clemente will want to be put on the map for something like this, for medical care. I'm just hoping that. And I looked at the population. I mean, in 1960, we had 8,500 people. We're up to 63,000 people now. We need something good for this population. I mean, this population is aging. I'm in my 50s, I'll admit to that, but I mean, I've had trigger finger surgery, breast cancer surgery. I have friends with the hip replacements. All these are being done in Mission Viejo. Why can't they be done here, close to home where the population is? So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Sharon. Colin LeClaire, and then Warren Vidrine.
Good evening. Thank you for the time. My name is Colin LeClaire. I'm a resident of San Clemente. I spoke in here a few weeks ago. For those who don't know me, I'm a healthcare policy advisor, an advocate for healthcare system reform, and I manage a group of over 300 physicians in Orange County. Our mission in the ACO that I manage is to improve the quality and affordability of healthcare for Medicare patients. And for the past 3 years, we've been the highest performer in the nation. I spoke to this committee a few weeks ago to express my support for the transformation of this hospital. Not for the closure, but for the reinvention of it. I described the 4 reasons that hospitals across the country are closing and transforming at historic rates. 1, because hospitals are enormously expensive. 2, because hospital-based medical costs are the largest driver of the healthcare crisis in this country. 3, because avoidable medical errors make hospitals among the most dangerous places to be in the country. And 4, because hospital closures are firmly supported in Washington, D.C. They see the need to move inpatient care to the ambulatory setting. And for those 4 reasons, this is a problem across the country, not in San Clemente. And I think it's a good problem to have. It's forcing us to think about how to reinvent our health system. So Memorial Care's visionary transformation of this facility is actually perfectly aligned with the movement that we're seeing across the country that is intended to improve how healthcare is delivered. I recognize, though, that in my role I have sort of a unique view of how healthcare is changing nationally, and I acknowledge that in our lifetimes, the hospital has sort of been a central figure in the healthcare delivery system that we know. So it's hard for many of us, I think, to imagine a healthcare system without one, right? It's hard to ask all of us to do that. So over the past few weeks, I've launched sort of an informal survey of my own, asking anybody who will listen, sometimes cornering some of the SOS folks in the parking lots and asking my friends and neighbors, what their thoughts are on this change. And here are sort of some of the things that I found. First, an overwhelming majority of voters in this community agree with the need to reinvent and remodel, modernize this campus. Overwhelming majority. The second group of respondents that I heard from represent a smaller percentage of San Clemente's residents, but they're kind of indifferent. And they trust that the health system experts will do what's right for the community and do what's necessary. And they're sort of stepping out of the argument. And still a tinier, smaller minority group is represented by an understandably emotional and very vocal minority of residents who want to preserve the status quo that they're familiar with. And I understand that. I understand that need, that drive. But in the past few months, I've spent countless hours looking at plans to redesign health systems all across the country. Spent time all over Southern California, Utah, Arizona, Nevada, New York, Texas, Massachusetts, and many others. And this small vocal minority exists in all of those places. And yet the transformation of those health systems continues because it has to. So could Memorial Care have made different investment choices over the last 7 years? Maybe. Would it have changed this outcome? Almost definitely not. Memorial Care can't control the environment that has forced them to pursue this transformation any more than they can control the weather. So I applaud Memorial Care for being brazen enough to reinvent this campus rather than abandon this community and sell this to a 6th owner.
Thanks, Colin.
Thank you.
Okay. Warren Vidrine, and then Lovell Kleinman, and then Gus Gialamas.
Well, I did not go to yesterday's open house, but I did go to the previous one. I had a pretty long discussion with Dr. Wacholder. One thing I wanted to ask him about were some of the figures that he had earlier presented as far as justification for why a hospital and an emergency room was not warranted here. I've researched some of the figures. The fire department has reported on some of the figures. He, again, said that, quoted an extremely low bed count, which is absolutely false. The number of people who are officially admitted is small, but the bed count is the number of people in the beds who are patients overnight. It's a lot larger. And modern medicine, the transformation of medicine, says that people aren't necessarily admitted as semi-permanent patients in a hospital. A lot of them are kept several days or weeks for observation, but they're real people and they occupy real beds. Similarly, bypass ratios. The incidence of neighboring emergency rooms being closed because of overcrowding is significant. None of those did he address. He simply said that I didn't know what I was talking about. And he went further. He said that people like me should just shut up. I did. I didn't talk to him anymore. But I am not shutting up now, and I've come to the firm realization that the people that have presented so far, there does not seem to be communication with the rest of the board. So my charge to the council is talk to the whole board, present the facts. There's either delusion or lies or a combination of things going on, and there seems to be some withholding of information within the memorial care structure. Get to the bottom of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vidrine. Sir, can you tell me what your name is?
Lowell Kleinman. I'm a family and palliative care physician.
Lowell Kleinman.
Which is why you can't read my handwriting.
Lowell Kleinman. Got it. Okay. Thank you, Lowell.
Thanks. So I'm here today just to talk on behalf of myself and the other family physicians and internal medicine physicians that are part of Memorial Care Medical Group and have a practice in San Clemente. And what I wanted to talk about was the benefits of a medical home. It's another transformation that's happening across the country, and you may have heard about what a patient-centered medical home is and what it looks like. But what we're talking about with this medical office complex is exactly the sort of transformation that medical homes are bringing to communities. They're more than just one-stop shops. They're places where patients are getting very, very comprehensive, patient-centered care that doesn't exist right now in our community. And the reason it doesn't exist is because a lot of our offices are siloed. We don't talk to each other. We don't communicate to each other. People are on different EMR systems. A medical office complex that's being described takes care of a lot of those problems, a lot of the care coordination problems that probably all of you have experienced or your families have experienced. And it raises care to a new level. And this is why in many of the communities in our country we're transforming into medical homes. So I think the issue around the ER and whether it should be open or not, it really doesn't have much to do with the medical home, quite frankly. And I'm speaking for these docs not so much to talk about the opening or closing of the ER, but really the opportunity that a new complex is going to offer. And when you look at the other towns that are around us, there are medical homes that are existing, and there's a reason why patients go to those medical homes. Right up the road, Mission, they've got excellent medical home. And our patients leave this town and go there for a reason. It's a different level of care that they get there because of the way healthcare is being organized. And so I just hope that as we think about what's going on here, that we think not so much in terms of just an ER or hospital, but really in terms of what's happening across the country with this transformation into medical homes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Gus G. Lamas, Tony Struthers, and then George Gregory.
Good evening, City Council. I certainly didn't expect, thank you for allowing me to speak. I didn't expect to have to come and give you some more data, but I'd just like to clarify a few things. The nice lady who said we did 15 surgeries a month, I do about 25 a month there. The actual number is about 115, 1,200 to 1,300 a year, just for information. Colin, the very thoughtful fellow from Monarch back there, thinks that we're a vocal minority. And I asked Colin just now, how many people would that be? What's a minority? We have about 4,000 to 5,000 signatures. So I'll ask that again from Colin later. I like what Dr. Kleinman said about a new complex. We all want something new. And I think when we first came here months ago, we talked about the 4 options that Memorial Care had given us. And one of those options was to build us everything that they want to do, outpatient surgery, outpatient radiology, and a new hospital. And I certainly would support that. But that's not really why I'm here. I came here to thank you. And I wanted to read if I may, a press release from the California legislature. Sacramento, Assemblyman Bill Breaux and Senator Patricia Bates toured the emergency room at San Clemente Hospital last Friday. Memorial Care's board of directors plans to consider the future of the hospital and its emergency room later this month. They issued the following joint statement. As South County continues to grow, we need to make sure our residents have access to quality health care that includes emergency life-saving services. We look forward to working with our local elected officials, Memorial Care, and Save San Clemente Hospital Foundation for a comprehensive solution. Breaux and Bates met with Memorial Care and a group of doctors who are actively opposing the closure. Dana Point and San Clemente were both represented by council members. Both legislators expressed they wanted the opportunity to explore options that would lead to a mutually beneficial outcome for the community and Memorial Care. At the request of City of San Clemente, Breaux and Bates are prepared to pursue legislation if needed as a resolution for all parties involved. San Clemente Mayor Pro Tem Bob Baker said, "This is not just a San Clemente issue. The impacts will be felt in the entire region. ER wait times will increase, and Orange County Fire Authority assets will have to be moved to cover for paramedics waiting longer in the impacted ERs." I want to thank you, all of you, for your leadership and for your thoughtful comments over the last several months. This started with a meeting with Lori Donchek and Chris Ham later, and then Mayor Brown jumping on board 2 days before the election, I might add. I know. And also, but I want to also single out Bob Baker, who I thought really came to understand this issue and is, I think, a thoughtful pro tem mayor who will lead our city to a good solution, which might include everything that Memorial Care would like and everything that we would like. And I think that's an option.
Thank you, Gus.
Let me give this to you.
Okay, Tony Strillers and then George Gregory is our last card. I think it was just small talk. I don't think it's.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Tony Struthers, San Clemente resident and the administrator of Saddleback San Clemente. For the past 6 months, we've been attempting to engage the community in dialogue regarding our future vision for the San Clemente campus. We've held scores of meetings with community groups and residents and have sponsored 3 open houses, 2 in San Clemente and 1 in Dana Point last evening. Our goal was to educate residents about the vision and answer their questions. As I stated before, we have heard support from many in these meetings. For those with concerns, our overwhelming response is the provision of emergency services, especially the ability to receive 911 calls. I have assured our community that we have an outstanding EMS system in South Orange County, and they are providing outstanding first responder care to our residents. As we contemplate potential changes, I have the utmost confidence they will continue to provide these same services to our residents. However, a way to maintain these emergency services on this campus is through legislative or regulatory relief from the state of California. Memorial Care has been supportive of this option from the beginning of this feasibility study and was offered as a potential option during the Hospital Advisory Committee process. I am encouraged by the support of the city management and members of the City Council and our elected representatives in Sacramento. Last night, your colleagues in Mission Viejo joined in unanimous support to pursue this option. See if I can make it through this next part, because I'm a little frustrated and a little, it's gotten to me a little bit. But this evening, I also want to talk about the Save Our Hospital organization that took out a full-page ad in the Sun Post News on January 23rd, 2015, attacking Memorial Care and stating, quote, that in the past 2 years, Memorial Care has purposely scaled back on beds and staff to make the financial state of the hospital appear worse than it actually is. This attack is vicious and malicious and does nothing to support the hospital. In fact, it is my opinion, it has done just the opposite, while it is undermining the public trust in our ability to provide safe, quality care to our community. Operationally, I really don't need or appreciate this type of support, and it's my hope that this ad never appears again. We'll continue to engage in constructive dialogue with community organizations and residents of San Clemente and surrounding communities throughout our feasibility study. We have also committed to collaborate with our elected officials in pursuing freestanding emergency department legislation. I have been honest and transparent this whole process, and I will do my best to keep it that way through this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Tony, before you step away, we've had a lot of interest on our website. We have the hospital page, and it's been called to our attention that the open house schedule is a little bit out of date. Could you have someone from your group send the city tomorrow do you have more open houses scheduled?
Not at this point. We may in the future, but at this point, we don't have anything that's specifically.
Oh, so the open house.
Well, we may
phase
have
is
more in
over.
the future, depending upon how things go. Sure. I mean, we're not going to preclude us not having more open houses. If we feel that there's a need to continue this process, absolutely. I mean, I personally think that the open houses were very positive. I think that we did some education.
Oh, that's,
and we did
it
some
was just a calendar question.
Yeah, that's
okay. Thanks.
Okay, can I get a motion? George. Oh, George Gregory. I almost skipped right over you, George.
Sometimes I realize.
How are you?
George Gregory. Hi, council. Thanks for having me. George Gregory, North Beach, perpetual criminal. Well, I'd like to point out the hypocrisy of Blue Ribbon Week and how we seem to persecute some of our citizens and we don't persecute them all. Selective enforcement is very real in our community. We sanction thievery through ticketing of tradesmen. We sanction thievery of ticketing people who live in the low-income, multifamily areas just because they leave their car in the way of the street sweeper. We don't enforce these laws in other parts of the town. We only enforce these laws in the places where people have a little less money to rub together. It's class discrimination. How many of those children are going to be on a ladder in their lives? Are they going to be painters, window washers, carpenters? Are we going to persecute them too? Those kids are standing up for their fellow citizen. Don't you think the council should stand up for their fellow citizen? How would you like to have dictated to you what you can and cannot carry around in your vehicle? Did you know 3 out of 5 vehicles sold in America are trucks? But we dictate what you can carry on your truck or in your truck or showing from your truck. In the low-income areas, the multifamily areas of our town, we only give them street sweeping tickets because the other people can't be bothered. We have taken numerous amounts of money, lots of money from these people, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, just because of where they choose to live. If you don't like your neighbor because he's a painter, then move. Don't chase the painter off. We all need a place to live. And you ask why I'm here alone? Because those people are busy trying to make ends meet. Those people are scared to be in here. And those people did sign petitions that were largely ignored. Hundreds of signatures. One comment was, a couple of those signatures from out of town. Maybe we should build a wall around the town then. So anyways, I would like you guys to consider the hypocrisy that I see with Blue Ribbon Week and the bullying that has been continued and is still continuing. Okay, there's nothing wrong with a guy working in trades. There's nothing wrong with a ladder on your truck or a piece of pipe. It's not gonna hurt anything. And the idea that we should just go out and go shopping and buy a van because that's the only acceptable thing that you will accept is ridiculous. As a matter of fact, if you've been noticing, the vans are getting taller. The vans are getting longer. The vans are huge, and the vans are rolling billboards. Some people have a truck for their only means of support, their only vehicle that supports their family. You tell them that they have to put it in the driveway. That takes away the safety of the driveway for their friends, family, and the little children who will now have to get out of the van that they're probably driving around in, because the vans carry people better than ladders, in the street. It's a real crime. It's a shame. Please agendize this.
Thank you, George.
Thank you very much
And
for your time.
I think it was last meeting that Kathy asked to agendize the street sweeping, and it did get agendized, right? So, yes. So it's coming up, George. So you have an opportunity to speak again on this topic.
10 hours. That meeting will be probably 10 hours, according to Mr. Baker.
I'll move that we waive the reading in full of all resolutions and ordinances.
Second.
Motion by Lori, second by Tim. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0.
Closed session report, City Attorney.
The City Council took no reportable action during the 5:30 p.m. closed session.
All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion without discussion unless council, staff, or the public request removal of an item for separate discussion and action. I have not received any requests for removal.
Lori? Tim? Okay. Bob, what's yours?
G. Item G.
Item G. It's an item very near and dear to my heart. I'm glad that you're bringing this one up, Bob.
I move the balance.
Second.
Motion by Ward, second by Donchak. All those in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you. Item G. We have a staff member to discuss this. Hey, look, it's Andrew.
I can't help it. The beard is just calling to me. I know it's Blue Ribbon Week, but I just keep looking at it.
I wish it were a little thick.
Bob, fire away.
Andrew, I'm very encouraged about this, and the only reason I pulled this is because I would like to give it a little bit of publicity around town for the folks that are watching at home. I'm very encouraged by this. Would you please run through a couple of these things for the folks at home? Can we show these slides, Laura? Just a couple of minutes, Andrew. Nothing exhaustive. I just want to show some of the things we're doing to conserve water here in the city.
Okay, so the idea here is the public spaces, so parks, medians, places around community development. These are non-functional areas of turf, so that means they're turf areas that aren't generally used for play. This area, Miracosta Park, it actually already has plans for this area not to have turf. So it's actually going back to the original plans of the park. Not sure why that happened in the past and why turf was put there, but we're going back to the original plan.
What's it going to be replaced with? What's that turf on the right side of the sidewalk going to be replaced with?
Oh, it's hard to read. But it's plants and shrubs that use a lot less water, and it's the plants and shrubs that are in that area already.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't read this.
Thanks.
Forester Ranch Community Park, there's this hillside at that community park. On either side of that hillside, there are shrubs there, except for this hillside, which is city-owned or city-operated. So we're going to continue what that plant palette is, and that's acacia and honeysuckle. Right here, Cyril. Here's some acacia. The Los Maris medians, there's only one median left on the Los Maris, Camino de Los Maris, which still has turf grass, and it's a narrow strip. It's actually a safety hazard for the people that go out there and mow that lawn too. So we're going to, we had actually been replacing the turf with Hemerocallis daylily and Raphiolepis. So we're going to continue that, so have that same plant palette. And we'll finally get rid of all the medians that have turf grass on Camino de los Maris. Marblehead Inland Park, there are these very steep slopes on the street side and on the school side. We'll do a similar type of thing where we'll plant acacia, honeysuckle, that type of stuff. And then on that bottom slope side, there are some fences that keep balls from rolling down hills. It gives us an opportunity to possibly remove those fences, which are chain link fences. They can be kind of an eyesore. So we're going to investigate that when we do plant. You can see those fences down there at the bottom on the right. So Ceanothus, Cistus, and Heteromeles are some of the plants that we might put there. Vista Hermosa Sports Park at the monument in front there. There's a big turf area that never gets used, but on the there's another entry sign on the other side of the sports fields that has a similar type of look, but instead of turf grass, they use rosemary, which is a Mediterranean plant, and in our Mediterranean climate would do really well here with very little water. There's a picture of that right there. And the community development building has a lot of turf grass around the building, and that doesn't get used to walk on. There are a lot of pathways that people can walk on. It's not a good place to play because you might hit some glass. So these are the plants that we put there in its place. So agave and Matt Rush. And then our utilities office, there's a big turf area right around the utilities building. It's just workers that go here. You know, we don't play on the job, so we have no reason to have the turf grass there. So we're going to replace that with the Ilex cornuta. And that's it.
Before you go on to the item that you're going to discuss, I want to bring something up with this that I didn't think about till just now. How about the areas adjacent to Pico, east of this high school? Is that in a future plan?
Those aren't city-owned.
Oh, association?
Yeah, I think those are, yeah, they are association-owned.
Okay. Yeah. I know where you're going. Please feel free, because I'm going to.
Yeah, Andrew, one thing, and I understand there are some plans at the golf course to do some turf removal.
That's correct.
So I'm happy to hear that. I'm encouraged by all these things because the city is taking a leading role. We're taking the first steps in this turf removal, and I commend you and everybody that's had a piece of this for doing this. It's very forward-thinking, and thank you very much.
I got to say, all these projects are great except for that project at the golf course on the 5th hole. If anybody plays golf, the 5th hole is one of the most difficult holes, and I oftentimes play from that area, so I'm not very happy by the turf removal on that side of the golf course.
Maybe you should take a lesson or two.
Well, maybe I should.
Yeah, okay.
If I had more free time, maybe I could do that. So, anyway, thank you. Before we move the item, are you about to do it? How do we need to approach this? Because we had a second item pulled from staff.
That's up to council. That was turned in after you took action on item E.
Okay, so what's the?
Have to reconsider.
Okay, after we approve this, after we move this one?
This is the item before you, so take action on this one and then.
No, this is for a different item.
No, he's saying.
Oh, finish with this
on
item.
the, on the consent, yeah, but
Okay.
this item you just pulled, G.
Okay.
All right, and I'll move the item.
Second, so motion by Baker, second by Ham. All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes 5-0.
Thanks, Andrew.
And before we go back to E, I'd like to request from the city clerk, could you send us a one-sheet on what the policy or what the process is for something to be on the consent calendar? Because the item that Mayor Pro Tem Baker pulled, that was a $500,000 decision. You know, the other ones were $17,800, $4,800, $97,000. I'd like, you know, it would be a good review for all of us to know kind of the spirit of the consent calendar and what the criteria are for something to end up there rather than in new business or as a, that'd be very helpful for us in terms of running the business meeting.
Okay, Jeff, do we have to reconsider this, or can we just allow him to speak on
No,
it?
you have to reconsider it. You took action.
Move that we
Okay.
reconsider item E.
Motion by Doncheck, second by Brown. All's in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0. Mr. Gregory, item 6E.
Thank you very much. George Gregory, part-time pirate. I'd like to talk about this ongoing undergrounding that we seem to be selecting in the commercial and industrial areas of our city. It really adds very little, if none, to health and safety. To where if these projects were done in the multifamily areas, we would possibly get all the strollers off the street. If you ever drive around in those areas, you'll see all the strollers on the street, and it's a simple reason. The sidewalks are dysfunctional. There's a telephone pole in the way all the time. And on top of that, these people pay a lot of taxes and stuff, and they can barely afford it. And every time I see these little gifts, you know, it's like another knife plunging in our backs, a little twist, bleed them a little more, bleed them a little more. These things should be priority to making our streets safe and stuff. Even Mr. Talega is going to park in our neighborhoods to go to the beach, and he's going to find himself pushed out into the street. So these are bad projects. I would like to see them reevaluated, to tell you the truth. You know, the idea that we're going to build a paseo in the alley to go shopping just enrages me, because where are you going to park all these shoppers? We're just exacerbating the same problem over and over again. We keep throwing it. And there's another problem too, that when staff is the only people that know about these grants, know about these opportunities, and the only people that can bring this up to council to give these gifts to them, then only the people who are entrenched into the staff and into City Hall know about these things. Nobody else knew there was available grants out there, and nobody else seemed to care to try to bring these to our communities, to our neighborhoods, and create health and safety. So this is a big gift for these people. And these people all got their hands on their hips, wagging their tongues, going, we need, we need, we need. Well, the citizens need. The taxpayer needs. The majority of people need. So these are very bad things. Other homeowners pay an assessment. Other homeowners pay for electricians. Other homeowners dig their own trench or hire somebody to dig that trench. And they will pay for their own permit. But we're gonna give it to these people who keep going, we need parking, we need a patio, we need to go shopping. Well, I need health and safety. I need convenience. I need reconsideration of these projects. Whether they go through or not, we need to turn the corner. We need to do a left instead of a right or whatever it is, okay? We can't keep giving these gifts to these people who are giving nothing back. So they'll throw a party and they'll say, look at the wonderful party we threw. They're doing it with our money. So through the grants and stuff, I suggest that you tell them, we'll match you in the future. We'll match you dollar for dollar up to a certain amount. That's a fair deal.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
And before we move this item, Mr. Cameron, would you like to speak on this item? Because I know, George, I felt some of your anger when I looked at the locations doing this in and not doing them in some of the neighborhoods. But I think staff, I expressed those concerns to staff, and they have a reason for doing so. So I'm gathering Tom's going to tell us why those reasons are.
I'm happy to answer any questions the council has. Tom Bonnigan,
So,
Assistant
Tom,
City Engineer.
why did we do the Los Molinos commercial district prior to doing it?
If I could go back in time, but there were council-directed priorities from. I mean, this project has been on the books, as the council's aware, for almost a decade and a half. It was established in 1998. So, and at that time, the council went through a prioritization, and we had Los Molinos established, and then the two Del Mar districts. As I mentioned in the report, based on your direction through the strategic planning for the general plan, we will come back to you early in next fiscal year and go through that process again and have a more detailed and thoughtful discussion about any renewed priorities. But these have been on the books, and at least with the case of Los Molinos Calle Valle, is now funded and ready to actually happen. And we can have a discussion about what happens with Del Mar, because that's still in design and hasn't started.
Tom, will we have any opportunities coming up in the next couple of years to do more of these projects in residential neighborhoods?
No, because these projects that we're talking about here are funded under CPUC, California Public Utilities Commission Rule 20A. And the guidelines of that generally, I don't have all the criteria memorized, but it generally limits these kind of projects pretty much to commercial type areas. A residential area wouldn't qualify based on the criteria. So that's why you see these that are funded under Rule 20A happen in commercial areas, arterial streets, and so forth. You can't just do it anywhere there's an overhead line.
Has staff looked into grants in residential areas before?
I have never found a grant program that's even available that could help with utility undergrounding.
You said everybody pays into those things. Who's everybody?
Ratepayers from the investor-owned utilities. So there's
Citizens, the same people who live on the street.
Thank you, George.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Monaghan.
Tom, if people in neighborhood though, but this is an intriguing thing though, if you have a overhead line in your neighborhood, you can vote for an assessment. Is that correct?
That's correct. So what we've been talking about with the projects coming up, they're called Rule 20A. There's a Rule 20B and a 20C. And real quick, Rule 20B is there's a method there where, and this happened, the most recently one was in the Calle, thank you, Los Lobos Marinas area, where those property owners voted to form an assessment district, and over a period of 20 years, they paid into it, and that undergrounded overhead lines that used to exist in that area, so that, property owners can do that, or under 20C, a group of property owners in any part of town can just get together on their own and approach the utility directly and work on a direct funded project. So there are options still to do it in other areas. The assessment district approach is not easy, but it is an option as well for where Rule 20A doesn't apply.
And I just want to make it clear for the record that this item that the citizen wanted to talk about is the Los Molinos Business District, and I, for one, am so proud of the progress that's been made in that area. That's where a lot of our surfing small business owners are. That's where we've put a lot of effort into turning around an area that could have gone a different direction. So I'm very enthusiastic about this $4,800 item in front of us, and I'm even more proud about Los Molinos because it's part of the San Clemente personality. And so with that, I'll move the item 6C.
I'd like to I'll be happy to second that, but so I'll second that, but I do have one more comment that I'd like, and one more point I'd like to make, and a question for Mr. Bonnigan. You say that we're going to project a savings of up to $17,000 in the general fund related to new streetlight costs. Would you tell me how we're going to get those savings, Tom? What technology has allowed us to get those savings?
The savings actually is directly related to a lower actual cost than SDG&E estimated when we budgeted the item. So last fiscal year, your council approved a $50,000 item because SDG&E told us we should plan for that to add 13 new streetlights in the Los Molinos area. Well, we just received an invoice, and so right now it's 17,000 less, and there might be some slight changes during construction, but it's just their updated actual real-world current estimate. So we're coming in lower than what we thought.
So these aren't LED streetlights that we're installing?
These are not LED streetlights. These are going to be SDG&E owned. They're not city lights. SDG&E is working on their own kind of long-term plan to switch out all of their own streetlights, which are generally the ones mounted on the wood poles, to switch those out to LED. But for right now, they'll probably go in as conventional high-pressure sodium, and then they'll get switched out in the future.
And what's the status of our efforts to take a look at some LEDs on some places in town?
So I've been coordinating with SDG&E, and I actually have, I just received today a loan application. They've been working on a pro forma to convert and begin converting our city-owned streetlights on arterial streets. So now that I have that detailed information, I'm putting together a report to get your approval and direction to do that and compare and show you why I think this is the best way to go as opposed to some other options. But I'm going to bring you a plan shortly that will start converting our arterial streets to LED. Are there 4 different streetlights still at the corner of Pico and La Plata? At Pico and La Plata, at each corner above the traffic signals, there's a safety light. They're all LED, one on each corner. There are 4 different manufacturers. One of those is the one that my electrician likes the best. It has the best warranty, best life, best light distribution, et cetera. I trust him 100%, so we're going to recommend to go with that. It's on SDG&E's rebate list. It's eligible for the project, so it's the one on the northwest corner.
No, don't tell us. We're going to guess.
Okay.
We're going to go out there and look and guess.
Okay.
So if you have input, that's the place to go. If you could pick out one of the 4.
La Plata and Hermosa.
Yeah. No, La Plata and Pico.
Before we go on with this item, I got a question. Are we applying for any federal grant money for the LED switchover?
No, this would be all through a program that SDG&E offers, and again, I'll detail it, but the idea is that we'll be able to do it with minimal or no out-of-pocket expenses to the city. It'll be paid back through on-bill financing and through a rebate that they offer to incentivize conversion to LED. There's no federal funds involved with this, no state funds either.
Okay. So we have a motion by Lori and a second by Bob. All those in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. George.
The public hearing process includes a staff presentation, a presentation by the applicant not to exceed 10 minutes, and public testimony not to exceed 3 minutes per speaker. Following closure of the public hearing, the City Council will respond to questions raised during the hearing, discuss the issues, and act upon the matter by motion. This evening's public hearing is to consider general plan clarifications and amendment initiation.
Good evening, members of the City Council. Jim Pettis, City Planner. I'm going to do the initial introduction to this, and Chris is going to go through the different clarification points. Just to give you kind of the goals for this evening, the first thing, a previous City Council meeting, the City Council asked us to reevaluate the schedule for the zoning ordinance update to try and expedite certain areas where we know that there's developers who are interested in coming in and processing projects. So we're going to talk about that. Also, we're going to go over the specific clarifications of particular areas in the general plan that may not reflect exactly what the council's direction was. So we want to get some clear direction before we go into the zoning ordinance update for those particular areas. And then finally, we're going to ask the City Council to initiate a general plan amendment to address any comments that they have in terms of changes of the general plan, but also some minor cleanups and things that need to be done nonetheless. In regard to the schedule, we did reevaluate the schedule, and the new schedule has the completion date in June, which is basically a 5-month process from now. And so that's a much quicker process. What was the last one about? December. So hope that's I think the best we can do, and hopefully with the direction tonight we can proceed. Also, I just wanted to quickly just cover, all the things that are happening in the next year and a half in terms of the planning schedule. As you can see, there's quite a large amount of projects. Most of it is general plan implementation related, including the different aspects of the zoning ordinance update and also the LCP. We're proceeding with the local coastal program, and that'll be going to Planning Commission in March, the first half of that, and onto the City Council probably in April or so. But anyway, it's important to coordinate both efforts because the LCP's second portion is going to include zoning requirements. So the two have to be coordinated very closely. A couple other highlights that you'll see pretty soon is the strategic implementation plan integration to the LCP, which is coming up. The other big project is the housing element update, which our staff is working on right now. Related to the undergrounding, the downtown Paseo plan will be coming to you this spring, and a landscape ordinance. And then I think a kind of an exciting project, we have a team of people coming from San Luis Obispo down, from the students and the professors, to help us come up with concepts for the very south end of town for the surf zone, design guidelines, complete streets, and so that's something to look forward to. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris. Just as far as a format tonight, what I'd like to do, if it's okay with the City Council, is to go through the different clarifications first and let Chris to get through that. Go ahead and ask questions and things. And then after you go for your deliberations, we can go back to each particular area and have you take a straw vote and give us direction.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
But before we move on, if we could hold all discussion until the end, I think that'd be much easier to get through everything unless you have a specific question about. So, yeah, fantastic. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Chris, I have a question for you, if you don't mind.
Good evening.
Where's that bully wristband? We need to get that thing. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Good evening, council members. There's 7 areas of the city that we wish to get clarification on tonight.
We waited for you, by the way.
I look forward to talking to you this evening. Thank you. Thank you for your waiting patience. So, I've been very excited to talk to you about these 7 areas here. The first one is at the very end of Avenida Pico. During the general plan update, there was some interest in changing the land use of a neighborhood commercial lot. You see at the very right here, using my mouse, this area right here. From neighborhood commercial to private open space. There's a gnatcatcher habitat on that lot, and there was expectation that there would be a toll road extension there, which no longer is there a plan to do that or expectation. So it's not seen that there would be a viable option to put commercial there, and so staff is recommending that the land use be changed from neighborhood commercial to private open space. That's the first item this evening. The second item is related to this 1600 block of North El Camino Real. Here, seeing this picture, where mixed use in the old general plan and in the current general plan is a permitted use. So the designation is mixed use. However, the clarification that we want is it appears that there is an unintended change in this part of the city, because this area right here, if I could show you these lots right here that are adjacent to Calle, previously, if I go into the old general plan map, there was a designation for those lots, MU3. And then, so it divided that block into 2 designations, MU3 and MU2. And in the current general plan, if you look at the map, it's all MU2. So it changed that MU3 part to all MU2. And it appears that that was an unintentional change, and we wish to get clarification to make sure that we're correct on that there was no intended change there. And the MU2, just for a little clarification, the MU2 designation has less FAR, permissible FAR, so less density than MU 3.1. And that this third clarification is related to the mixed-use overlay. When you go into the land use element, there are no standards identified for the mixed-use overlay. So we need some clarification on that. Now, to bring you back to where this mixed-use overlay came from, it was a property owner request. There was a continued discussion about the idea of changing this area right here. So all the areas that I'm talking about are surrounded in red. Okay, and this area right here is the mixed-use overlay in the new general plan. And there was continued discussion about the idea of changing it to mixed use, and mixed use 3.1 specifically, that would allow FAR 2.0. And this part right here, there was already part of it in the old general plan that allowed FAR 2.0, right? So it was allowing mixed use. And the property owner had a concern because there's existing industrial uses there, and they didn't want to make those uses non-conforming. So the idea came about to do an overlay so that they could keep the existing industrial uses conforming and allow them to have the option to do mixed use in the future if they want to. It's staff's understanding that the intent was not to downzone it. When you look though, like I said, there's no clear standards in the general plan, so we're looking for some guidance on that and to get confirmation that the intent was FAR 2.0 there. Additionally, there was discussion back then that same property owner had requested to increase the FAR of industrial. So if they kept the site as industrial, to increase the FAR to 0.5 FAR. And that is consistent with the character of the area. So all throughout the adjacent properties in Los Molinos, the FAR is 0.5 that's allowed. And it's unclear if that change was made. It's our understanding, our impression that that change was supported by the council. In Coronado Lane, there was mixed discussion and extensive debate about the idea of this area of Coronado Lane to be changed from mixed use to residential high density. The General Plan Advisory Committee had a desire to change it to residential high density. There was some discussion about residential high density, but then some residents had concerns with that. And the Planning Commission ultimately recommended to the council to keep it as mixed use. But some council members wanted to come back and discuss this, so we've provided this item on the agenda tonight for rediscussion. And there was just this discussion about whether it should be residential high density considering the character of the area. Properties near El Portal were changed from neighborhood commercial to mixed use 1. Now this area over here on the east side was changed. There was some consideration of changing that to basically the idea of changing this to mixed use is the idea of enticing redevelopment and encouraging revitalization of this area. And there's some adjacent residential uses here, long-standing commercial uses where this mixed use area is. So the idea was allowing potentially more development and mixed use, but not making the existing uses non-conforming. So the question for the council is, should this remain mixed use or should it go back to neighborhood commercial? On the west side here is also changed to mixed use, but there's just a different question. And I go to this slide here, it shows that there's some topography constraints that could limit the development of commercial. So the question is, should this area on the west side be changed to residential, medium, consistent with the adjacent land uses, or should it remain as mixed use in the new general plan? In the mixed use area outside the downtown core, there are two main issues to talk about. The first one is related to standalone residential uses that can be converted into commercial uses in the future. There was a policy and discussion to allow such a thing, and there's not clear standards for that. I can get into that in just a minute, but there's also some clarification needed on the height and the height standards related to this area, because the height standards are taller than what is realistically, technically feasible and what staff believes is in character with the area. So there's a policy here where it specifically calls out flexibility to accommodate market changes in the area. And oftentimes in a downtown, areas outside the downtown core might initially start out as residential and slowly change to commercial. And the idea was to potentially plan from the very beginning, and you have a development plan, to allow the flexibility for those sites to initially start up as residential, but be designed appropriately so it makes it easy for them to be commercial and mixed use in the future. And the standards in the general plan, it doesn't really call that out. There's nothing in there specifically for residential uses only. So we want to make sure that to get some clarification on that. So here are some examples here, like a residential use, the Cabrillo Playhouse that was converted, duplex converted to a law office, a residential use converted to a ceramic shop. These are all buildings that were originally residential and converted over time to commercial. And the height standards in the general plan for that area, they're 45 feet for top of roof for a 3-story building and 37 feet to the plate line. When you look at a building, a really attractive, high-value building like the Bartlett building, that's taller than that building. You know, we have some comparisons here. The top of the roof at the highest point right here is 40 feet, so it's taller. The plate line is 30 feet, and over here it's allowing 37 feet. So staff's recommending that the standards be changed to more fit the character and what appears to be the intent was. And lastly, the seventh area is related to the mixed-use 3.2 area. These lots right here in red, that surrounded in red. This is a new land use area in South El Camino Real. It's changed from neighborhood commercial. And there is the idea, there's a policy in there that specifically calls out standards for, let me give you the exact wording here, because I think it's important. There's a policy, it says, we require that sites developed exclusively for residential use are designed, ... There's no standards that recognize residential projects only. So we want to make sure that the council agrees that the intent is to allow standalone residential as an option there. And then also to get into a discussion about stories, story numbers, and story heights. The overall vision of the area is the transitional area between the 5 freeway and Del Mar with a mixture of various uses. And the idea is, it's our understanding, to have either commercial, residential, or a mixture of residential and commercial. This shows the differences between the old general plan and the new general plan. The max density was 0.35 FAR with 2 stories. In the new general plan, it calls out 1.5 with residential, and it says 3 stories with residential, right? So it's not saying anything in here, well, what if you have residential only? There's nothing in there. There's a variety of examples of buildings there. There's much discussion about the idea of having, through the general plan process, of having 2 stories facing El Camino Real with a 3rd story tucked underneath along the alley. And there's a variety of buildings. We have pictures that show that that would be in character of the area head.
What picture is that you're pointing at right there?
What's that?
Where's that location?
These are various locations.
No, the bottom right corner that you were pointing at.
This one?
No, with the tree.
That one's the medical center.
Oh, that's okay. Got it.
So when you go, let's see, to the previous slide here, it says 3 stories with residential, right? It doesn't account for the fact that the alley is at a lower elevation. So you could interpret that 4 levels would be allowed there if you were to do a basement. So I have a slide here that shows a difference in profile and how you interpret it. 3-story heights right here, and you're looking from the alley. If you look up, it could appear to be a 4-story. It's staff's impression that the intent was more like this, with 2 stories facing El Camino Real, with the idea of a 3rd story being tucked underneath, facing the alley.
Can I a little bit?
Yes.
I thought it'd be important to give everybody some history, because maybe you're not all familiar with it. But back in the 1993 general plan, we had a problem with traffic capacity on El Camino Real. And at that point in time, the FAR was lowered from, I don't remember what it was at the time. I mean, we might not even had an FAR standard. But you had all those building examples that we just showed you. Back before the 93 general plan, these are the kinds of developments we were getting under the previous standards. And with the general plan, we had to, in order to meet the traffic modeling requirements, we had to lower the FAR to 0.35. After that point in time, virtually nothing has happened in that particular corridor. So during the general plan process, the idea was to try and upzone the area to create some, development incentives for the area. But also during the discussion of this area, I think the vision was to try and recreate what was originally allowed back down there. And what we're looking for is a clarification, because the actual standard that was developed in the general plan in the land use section allows the scenario on the left-hand side, not the idea of 2-story off El Camino Real and tucked under. So we're looking for a clarification of what the council's intent is on that. Thanks, Chris. That's all I had.
And so that really concludes my presentation for the 7 areas. I think you get an idea of what direction we're looking for, and I have the recommendations on the right.
Great.
If you want me to clarify any of them.
Before we start discussion and ask to hear from the public, I've got a request to take a short restroom break. So we will be back at 7:50.
Before we do that, could you just read into the record the recommendations?
Sure. So the first item is to change the neighborhood commercial area at the end of Avenida Pico to private open space. That's the clarification 1. Clarification 2 is to restore the land use designation for that area in the 1600 block back to mixed use 3.1. Like I had said, it looked like an unintended change, so it's to clarify that in the general plan and put it back to how it was. The third one is to increase the FAR, make it clear that there was an intent to increase the FAR, the industrial designation, in the mixed-use overlay to 0.5 FAR to match the character of the area. That the FAR for the mixed-use overlay be 2.0 to match the FAR of what a part of the old general plan was as 2.0. The fourth one is to change the mixed-use designation on Coronado Lane to high-density residential. The fifth one, there's 2 parts, to change the mixed-use 1 designation to neighborhood commercial on the east side, and to change it to residential medium density on the west side. On the 6th location, there's 2 parts to it, is to amend the intent, to clarify the intent that standalone residential uses are allowed, with the idea that they be converted to commercial. So that's clarifying the wording and the standards to recognize that standalone residential is okay. And to change the height standards to reflect what appears to be the policy, the preferred character, like the Bartlett building. So lowering some of those height standards. The 7th area, there's 2 parts to it. It's again clarifying that you could have standalone residential and the standards there. And then also to clarify that you could have 2 stories facing El Camino Real and 3 stories facing the alley. 3 levels facing the alley. That's it.
Okay. We'll take a recess till 7:55.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Chief. Thanks for sitting through that. Yes, it is a vacuum. Can you watch out that door? Okay, if you guys are okay with it, we'll hear from the public now. So the first person is Alba McKinley. Following Alba will be Nick Buchanan and Larry Culbertson. And I'm sure most of you are here, but it's 3 minutes, green, yellow, red. Oh, and I need to open the public hearing before we do this. There we go.
Good evening. My name is Alba McKinley. I'm a San Clemente resident. I'm here tonight as a representative for my father-in-law, John McKinley, who couldn't make tonight's meeting. I think you all might have a copy of this already, but I wanted to read a statement that he wrote addressing the general plan amendments. I'm the owner of the property located at 119 Coronado Lane, San Clemente. This property is currently zoned mixed use, MU4, in the Pure Bowl area. Over the past many months, in reviewing the general plan for its upcoming updates, there have been many meetings, upwards of 80, we believe. The consensus from this effort was that through community input, as well as recommendations from the Planning Commission and the City Council, the existing MU4 zoning should remain for the 100 block of Coronado Lane. Now it seems there's a desire to revisit this issue and change the usage to high-density residential. By changing the current zoning, this would create numerous problems for the area as a whole, as well as for my property specifically. I currently operate my property as a hotel, which is an allowable use under the MU4 zone. The Cove at the end of the block is also zoned MU4 and also operating as a hotel. If the zoning is changed to high-density residential, that would make my property non-conforming and would create a spot zoning issue for the Cove. Changing the MU4 zoning on the 100 block of Coronado is not consistent with the Coastal Commission's desire to make more, and not less, properties available to beach tourists serving businesses and accessibility. Recent studies show that hub transportation sites should be nurtured and developed with services such as restaurants and hotels, and not restricted by downzoning and residential use only. The train station at the pier is certainly a key hub location with immense potential. Why would the city restrict itself to potential local serving businesses in the future? A major reason that some of the properties to this point have not moved forward with the types of uses allowed under the MU4 zone is because of restrictive parking requirements. Just recently, the City of San Clemente has begun to allow parking alternatives such as off-site shared parking. This gives hope to property owners that there is a potential way to create new businesses on our properties. While being a property and business owner for more than 38 years in San Clemente, I've waited decades for a parking solution that will enable me to move forward with the development of my properties. And to now be downzoned is unthinkable. Having an MU4 zoning for my property is an integral part of my existing and future businesses that are on the 600 block of Avenida Victoria. The local coastal plan now in discussion stages seems to indicate a desire by the city to encourage hotel room capacity and not suppress them in the immediate coastal area. These seem to be conflicting viewpoints put forth by the city. The Cove is operating as a hotel and is apparently getting to keep its MU4 zoning. I also am operating as a hotel and expect to maintain my MU4 zoning. My best regards, John McKinley. Thank you.
Mr. Alderman, do you want to comment on spot zoning in this location?
Just briefly, there wouldn't be any spot zoning issue here. If you look at the zoning map, all of the blocks behind are zoned high-density residential. So the idea of spot zoning is that you're creating an island within a sea of dissimilar zoning. And it used to be thought that only if you're discriminating against the island or the spot is it spot zoning. It can actually be the other way. That's been clarified in a court case. But here, since there are so many properties that are adjacent to the lots on Coronado that are zoned high-density residential, and it's kind of on the edge of the change in zoning. I think the council has the discretion from a spot zoning standpoint to go either way.
Great, thank you.
I have a question for Jeff also. The comment about the hotel, that, the cove she's talking about, isn't that a condo project?
It's a timeshare.
Timeshare.
So it,
project. Thank you.
yeah, well, I'm not aware of that. I know it's all, I've dealt with it a number of times in past years. Maybe Jim Petchus would have more recent information, but I've always thought of it as being a timeshare.
As far as I know, it's a timeshare.
Mr. Buchanan, and then Larry Culbertson. Following Larry will be Michael Luna.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, City Manager. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'd like to just read a quick letter that I got and then just a 2-minute presentation. Recently, a couple of weeks ago, I got a letter from the City Manager. It says, "Dear property owner, I'm reading this a little tongue-in-cheek. I'm contacting you regarding a former retail gasoline property that you own in the city of San Clemente. City records indicate the property has not operated as a retail gas business for a considerable time. The city is interested in what type of redevelopment you may intend for your property and how the city may assist you to that end. Well, tonight I'm asking you for your help. Last year, after an extensive public input, the city approved policy and provided an incentive to encourage development on South El Camino Real. The picture that I've handed out is of the lot that I bought on South El Camino Real. It's an old gas station that has been sitting vacant for in excess of 30 years. South El Camino Real is an area that's plagued with urban blight and old vacant gas stations, some of which have been that way for more than 30 years. The effort that the City Council and the Planning Commission and all the 5 years that it took to approve the general plan and the incentives that were applied onto this specific area, I believe should be applauded. I'm a San Clemente resident, live in southwest San Clemente, and I bought one of those old abandoned gas stations because of the new language in the general plan. I met with staff and attended both Planning Commission and City Council meetings where they unanimously approved the language of the general plan. Since then, for in excess of a year, I've been working with city staff and a number of the City Council members as I've developed plans for the property. I have made adjustments to my plans in good faith based on their input. To date, I have invested a considerable amount of money and effort into the project, which I believe will provide a significant enhancement to the area. I've reached out to neighbors in the immediate residential community, and they've indicated that they'd love to see something done in that area. El Camino Real is the gateway to their community, and those old vacant lots with broken glass, graffiti on the alleys, and a general feel of urban decay don't portray a good neighborhood feel. They see the benefit of good development, especially mixed-use development that brings residential neighbors into the alleys and new businesses onto El Camino Real. They like the idea of the sound buffering those larger buildings would provide, shielding them from the noisy Pacific Coast Highway and the I-5 freeway. The initiative that is being proposed tonight, the general plan amendment specifically to this area where it drops the height from 45 feet down to 30 feet, is a wholesale turnaround for what was presented to the public and the Planning Commission in the final stages prior to the general plan being approved. It proposes to extend the T-zone 2-story restriction all the way down El Camino Real. In the T-zone, it was sold to the public as protecting the historic small town character of downtown San Clemente. Here on South El Camino Real, we have much larger buildings, as we saw in the staff's presentation a little bit earlier, as well as very different architectural character. One more characterized with larger commercial buildings, fast food drive-thrus, and old vacant sites. The heights as proposed in tonight's agenda drop the heights from 45 feet in El Camino Real to 30 feet, which is lower than that was allowed under the neighborhood commercial zoning. It's not even tall enough to build a good 2-level building with retail, office, and a pitched Spanish-style roof. The general plan goes further. It indicates that I'll wrap up, that the general plan language encourages staff meet with developers and find out how to encourage investments in these areas. I'd like to ask that the city look to their own mission statement and apply the rules and regulations fairly and consistently. Let's do the right thing. Please don't change the rules on me.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, actually, can I make one other comment about the previous speaker?
Yes, absolutely.
And when I said that, some timeshares are operated similar to hotels. There's really not a sharp distinction. So fractional ownership projects, sometimes the owners don't use their time slot, and if there's on-site management, there can be, in effect, it sort of walks and talks like a hotel. I don't know whether the Cove is being operated that way, but the fact that it was approved as a timeshare doesn't necessarily mean it hasn't sort of slid over into that type of operation. But so I'm just with that clarification.
Great, thank you. Hi, Larry.
Larry Culbertson, resident. What I'm going to talk about is 6A and B, kinda. I believe that promoting the mixed use in the T-zone and the old downtown core is making our parking situation far worse, and it's not achieving the goal of enhancing the pedestrian nature of downtown. Only 6 mixed-use buildings have been built downtown, all approved between 1999 and 2005. I'll go through them quickly. At 204 Avenida Del Mar, that required 8 parking waivers. At 127 Avenida Serra, they needed 3 parking waivers. At 115 Avenida Del Mar, they needed 3 parking waivers. 139 Avenida Victoria did not need waivers, but there's only one 300 square foot commercial building at ground level. All the rest of the ground level is parking. At 154 Avenida Victoria, there are 2 commercial spaces, small ones at street level, with a large curb cut and a driveway that looks into a huge parking area. 107 Avenida de la Estrella is a 16,000 square foot building on 4 lots. That's right behind the historic City Hall. It's hardly in keeping with the small town village character that we're trying to preserve. This past December, the Planning Commission approved a mixed-use project for, on a 4,000 square foot lot at 176 Avenida Cabrillo. It will have an 1,800 square foot residence and 2 337 square foot commercial spaces stacked one on top of the other, connected by an exterior stairway. Code only requires 3 parking spaces for all that. So these high-density parking deficient mixed-use infill projects must be allowed by right under the existing code. It's imperative that we tighten up these codes before any more of these kind of projects are approved. Allowing the mixed-use, the MU3 zone properties to be developed as residential, as staff is suggesting, without commercial, seems like an abandonment of the mixed-use concept. That might be a good idea. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Okay. Michael Luna, and then following Michael Luna will be Mr. Conrad and Mr. McGuire.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Michael Luna. I'm an architect in town, but tonight I'm here representing the Architectural Guild of South Orange County. Our group is comprised of approximately 25 design professionals, licensed professionals, architects, landscape architects, and urban planners, and they have asked that I speak here with regard to this issue that's in front of you tonight. Well, we all watched as the debate raged concerning the 3 stories versus 2 stories in the downtown when the general plan was under debate previously. 2 stories prevailed there, but clearly some were not happy with just limiting the downtown height limit. After many years and countless hours spent by the GPAC committee, they put forth their recommendations. These recommendations were adopted into the new general plan. Now, under the guise of cleaning up errors and ambiguities, land use and 2-story limitations is being dictated by just a few, despite what was recommended by the General Plan Advisory Committee. Citygate gave us numbers at the door when we walk in and a little more. Projects of any significance continue to be decided upon in back rooms. While the new general plan strongly encourages improvements and investments along El Camino Real, investor confidence is at an all-time low. Your property owners are simply not comfortable to invest in developments and improvements of their property, knowing that even if they comply with all the myriad of rules and regulations, change is just simply not wanted. Existing NC2 zoning currently allows 33-foot height limit along El Camino Real in this along the south portion of El Camino Real. What is proposed tonight is a 30-foot height limit that staff suggests, and in 30 feet you simply cannot get a proper 2-story piece of architecture in this town. You need proper ceiling heights of at least 12 feet for usable commercial leasing space, retail space, and you need at least 10 feet of ceiling height in office spaces. By the time you deduct structural, floors, and mechanical space, you're going to end up with a 30-foot number with flat roofs and small sloping roofs. And that stifles good development. You'll end up you'll end up with limitations on architecture that are not necessary. The Architecture Guild is not here to argue for more density. Rather, we seek fair treatment for your landowners out to work and invest within the established rules. Find ways to encourage sensitive development rather than taking away more property rights, which stifles development. The Architectural Guild recommends that you uphold the hard work and recommendations of your General Plan Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Mr. Conrad. Following Mr. Conrad will be McGuire, and then Sean Danish.
I'm Bob Conrad, Conrad Realtors, and I've got the building on the corner of Esplanade and El Camino Real. I was not made aware that this downzoning was happening till I saw Nick's plans, and it's a beautiful building, and I was excited about what he was doing. And then the downzoning, which may put this project in jeopardy, came to surface. We've been in that location 45 years. 35 of those years, we've seen a defunct gas station or a vacant lot. Probably 5 to 6 developers have either been in escrow, gone out escrow, and it just continues to sit. So I'd like to see this project go forth, and I hate to see it be downzoned in height limitations to stop projects like this, and that's why 35 years all these projects are sitting there with vacant lots and nothing on them. So anyway, from a real estate perspective, it only makes sense to keep things the way they are with a higher height limitation, keeping the limitation up high so he can do the project. And I think you'll see other people are going to do the same thing. I don't feel that there's probably many of the owners around me that know that this is going on, because I'm there 7 days a week and I didn't know what was going on. So anyway, I think it needs to be looked at really close and not jeopardize these really excellent projects that are on the board. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Can I have his minute? Mayor, members of the council, Mark McGuire, I'm going to just focus on the ones that I've worked on for the last 3 or 4 years through the general plan, and those are those North Beach properties. And specifically, I'll start with the self-storage site that we worked through the process to get a industrial designation with a mixed-use overlay. And I think, I would submit that what the Planning Commission did and what the council in endorsing that, not changing that, did was approve an FAR of 0.5 on that site. If you look at your general land use map, the only FAR for industrial is 0.5. And I never had any, I'm telling you, not one time was I ever made aware that there was a proposal that would be a 0.35 FAR, which is below what the FAR is of the self-storage right now. It would be out of conformance. The whole point of asking for that industrial designation instead of a mixed-use designation, which is what it was in the old general plan, was to allow that property to be in conformance, and then if it wanted to go mixed-use, you had the overlay to do it. So I would submit that property was never designated for a 0.35 FAR. I'm not sure where that is even coming from, except that there apparently are 2 possible designations, but it was never specifically designated for that lower FAR. So it wasn't a proposal to increase the FAR to 0.5. It was a proposal to make it a conforming industrial designation, which would be that 0.5, which is what all the Los Molinos properties are. Okay, so that's that specific issue. The second issue is related, that mid-block change of on El Camino Real, the proposal, the sense that maybe the council changed the designation from the maximum FAR of 2.0 to the lower FAR with the MU2. changing it. That was never proposed. It was never highlighted that there was a proposal to change. There were no documents that ever said that that changed. So I would just submit that that never, in fact, changed. I'm not sure where that even came about, that was something that happened. The last one, in terms of what the FAR is for the overlay, I will admit that that change apparently did not get incorporated into the general plan. So when you look at the land use map, it says FAR 1.0 for the mixed-use overlay. And when I saw that, I commented to Brian Judd from the Planning Center, and I got an email from him saying that their intention was to, and I'll quote, this is when they were changing it in September, we will be establishing density intensity standards for the mixed-use overlay, if I could just finish, overlay area consistent with the MU 3.1 designation, and we'll be adding the standards to the matrix. And I said, that's great, look forward to that, and then it just never happened. So that one, I think, needs to be cleaned up. I think it is a cleanup. The other two, I think, never changed. Thank you,
sir.
Mark, could we have a copy of that email? Debbie?
Yeah, I can give you it
The
here,
Brian Judd
and I
email?
did give it to Jim Petches.
The
And I've
staff
given it
has
to
it?
others,
All right.
yeah. And Brian also, there were other emails where he confirmed all of that. So, thank
Okay,
you.
our last speaker is Sean Dinesh. But before you speak, I have a question of staff. The last speaker mentioned that the self-storage is already over 0.35 FAR. Is that true? And if so, how would that occur?
That's our understanding, that it's over 0.35 FAR.
So how did that?
It was developed a long time ago, and
So prior to the 93 general plan is when it was developed?
The 1993 general plan, the FAR is 0.35.
Okay.
For the Calle site. So it did require an increase of FAR to 0.5 FAR to make his lots conforming.
Okay.
So staff is requesting clarification to make sure that the council agrees with Mark McGuire's position that the FAR was intended to be 0.5 FAR.
Okay, thank you. Sean? Thanks, Chris. Long drive this evening, huh, Sean?
Just about.
Yeah.
I came from Los Angeles, actually.
Oh, wow, so even longer.
My name is Sean Danish with Calvada Development. I'm the owner of the property at 1430 South El Camino Real, the old mobile service station right off of 5 Freeway. Just want to let you know that we have been in that property since 2008, and we had waited a long, long time to get all the zoning changed so we can finally get that particular site developed. And for a while, we thought that we had everything all squared away, so we could finally get it all going, until we find out that the FAR was changed to 1.5, and the 3 stories allowed. Now, as soon as we start moving on and getting everything going on, as far as the drawings and everything else concerned, we find out for the second time everything is going to change again. Just want to let you know that I agree with Mr. Luna and Nick 100% as to couple of things. Number one, I had received a letter from the city manager a couple of times wanting to know what it is that I'm going to do with that property. Well, until now, there has really not been anything that we could have done in this property. Number one, we could not get financing done in these properties because you could have put only 0.35 on the property, and that was nothing to justify the financial on the property. Now, since it's changed, you're thinking about changing the height to 30 feet long building, which is really not going to allow us to put the FAR of 1.5 on that property and make it look nice for the city of San Clemente. And fortunately, I've owned the property on the gateway of El Camino Real coming into San Clemente, and I'd like to do something pretty and nice for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, no more cards? Okay. With that, we'll close the public hearing.
Is your idea we're going to go through each one?
Yeah, I think we're going to start line by line and work our way through. I just want to make sure there's nothing that I want to address in questions so far. Yeah, I think we're good. Okay, So, first one should be an easy one. Fingers crossed.
I move that we amend the neighborhood commercial land use to private open space.
Okay.
Could I just say, all we're doing here is initiating the
Conversation.
process for
Thank
the
you.
general plan. We're not actually approving anything. We're just initiating a process.
We're giving direction for what council thinks is
Correct.
the way to go. Okay. So, do we need to vote on each one of these items? Is it still what?
But the staff would prefer
Okay, so
wants the
motion by
direction.
Doncheck, second
That
by
we
Brown.
initiate a general plan and amendment to amend the neighborhood commercial land use to private open space.
Okay. Second. Okay, motion by Doncheck, second by Brown. All those in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0. Item number 2.
I move we amend the area shown as MU2 to M3.1, restore this land use designation over the north end of the block between streets of Calle, Lago, and Los Molinos.
I'll second that.
Well, hold on. I think we need some discussion on this item before we go straight to a vote. So, this one to me, and you know, I've sat through the general plan process for a long time, and this to me seemed like this is the intent that we had with this, because we wanted to create a tiered effect on El Camino Real as opposed to some of the newer developments in that area are just essentially up and down on ECR. And so the intent behind this was to create a tiered effect, so that way you have the larger development in the backside and the smaller developments in the front adjacent to ECR, so you don't have this overwhelming built environment when you're driving or walking through there. So that's why I see this as being intended to be the way it is.
I think, Jim, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought we had something on from the planning center that showed those two were different. I'm looking for it now. That they were always different designated.
You have something? Yeah. What we have is the underlying 93 general plan, and it has the underlying zoning as MU3. I don't know if, I never saw anything in the planning center unless it's one of the old exhibits that Brian Judd had
It's probably
shared, and I don't have that with me, I'm sorry. But our belief is it's really just a bad mapping job by the consultant of not actually putting the lines in. If you see, you'll see a similar thing on the other side of the street. See MU 3.1 right here and MU2 right there, but there's no line in between. They just didn't put the lines in. And if here, because there's no line, and you have MU2 here and MU 3.1 over here, the assumption, you know, would be that it goes all the way to the street because there is no line. Oftentimes the street is the line. But if you look at the underlying general plan land use from the previous general plan, you'll see there was a line here, and there's also a line right here. So that's where we believe the lines should be, specifically because we never called out in that list of changes that we were doing, that was never called out as a change. So if it was a change, it was done completely unbeknownst to everybody.
Chris?
Yeah.
Do you want to see this?
Yeah.
It shows that.
So then, Jim, is staff's recommendation to leave the land use the same as it was in a 93 general plan?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you'd like for further clarification, Chris said he could pull up the general plan map that was adopted so you can see that's kind of the absence of lines there. The problem is there was a lot of detail left out of that map, and that's why we need the clarification.
No, I think it's readily apparent right there. That's.
Okay. Well, yeah, you guys have a motion by Doncheck and a second by Brown?
By Brown and Doncheck.
And again, the motion should be to
Initiate.
approve
Yeah.
initiation of the general plan amendment process to consider the change.
Okay.
Or to consider the to consider the clarification.
For the map.
To the map. Or,
Well, the language is here. It says to restore this land use designation over the north end of the block between the streets Calle, Lago, and Los Molinos.
Okay.
That's what we're doing.
That was the
We're
motion.
initiating that.
yes,
Okay.
excuse me.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's 5-0. Okay. Okay, next one.
Interested in the same area?
Yep.
Do we have any questions on this?
Yeah, well, I think we need to discuss, there's some discussion needs to be had on, one, are we gonna increase, I still need clarification on, so we're gonna up the FAR so that an existing business can come into compliance?
So
Is
it's
that-
not compliant, no, so it's not.
I mean, what kind of changes are we gonna foresee
I-
at a storage facility that we need to up the FAR to 0.5?
Chris might be able to add, but one thing Chris didn't mention is that everywhere else in Los Molinos during the general plan update is 0.5.
Well, and see, this is, I think this is where my concern with this comes in, is that we keep referring to the Los Molinos, but this is outside the Los Molinos district in my mind. I mean, this is off Calle del Lago, a block away. The industrial area, we've decided is in the industrial area, not adjacent to ECR, and we want to see that change in this area to a mixed use, a more community-like organization, not a more industrial use.
And-
So to me, it doesn't make sense that if the general plan's goal is to achieve a community by increasing the industrial FARs to appease a self-storage unit, doesn't make sense for the goals of the general plan.
But those are industrial lots, though. Those aren't retail.
Absolutely,
you know,
currently
you
they
know.
are.
Right.
But that's not where we want to
But
be
they'll
in the
never
future.
be facing ECR. They'll never have.
No, but I think Mr. McGuire can represent the fact that there's one owner that owns a large portion of that property, and his plan is not to have that be industrial. His plan is to move that towards what the goal of the general plan is.
They asked for the mixed use to be added to
Exactly.
that.
And so I think we should have a singular goal, and that singular goal is to create a community environment, not create an industrial zone outside of Los Molinos.
Well, can I
Well,
ask
it
for a
currently is.
clarification on that, Chris?
Yeah.
Is this the self-storage that the city council took up a CUP for, like, within maybe 2 years ago? 3 years ago?
You're thinking about the U-Haul that was on
Yes,
the roller
that's not this?
hockey, ex-roller hockey lot?
Right.
Not the same
Okay.
property. Well,
All right.
it is, there's two properties. This is the self-storage area that we're talking about that has a 0.5 FAR.
Yeah.
And then the other property that you're thinking about is right here, and I'm not sure what the FAR on that one is, frankly.
Well, I'm concerned about that because we gave them a CUP for that storage, U-Haul. And now we're gonna change it, we're gonna increase the industrial FAR on it, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So,
saying we
I'm
don't
kind of wondering
increase
what the
industrial
CUP
FAR.
process was, where we let them do the self-storage on that.
Yeah.
I don't
I
know
don't-
off the top
I
of
don't
my
either,
head what the
but-
FAR on that is, or.
So my point is, I don't think we want to encourage an intensified industrial use in an area that we're trying to encourage to be a community, mixed use. If we were talking Los
I
Molinos
interpret
district,
this
I would-
as a business-friendly portion of policy, that basically, rather than put the owner in the position of having a non-conforming use, we're recognizing
Well, supposedly it's not-
today's
he's
reality.
currently non-conforming. Is the
Right,
issue,
but
so
we're
it's no change.
recognizing today's reality by making it easier for him.
Well, and we're expanding his use though. I'd say if we're gonna.
Yeah, and we're giving him the mixed use, yeah, so I'm fine with this.
I can see your point.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but if we're gonna do that, I think we should limit it to exactly what it is currently, not give them more, so they can expand the use. I'm not opposed to maintaining the existing use, I'm opposed to expanding the existing use. Because that's not the goal.
Help me understand philosophically, so just start from the beginning on this, on this discussion. Right now, we have a property, what's the current FAR?
Okay, the general plan is a bit ambiguous on what the FAR was zoned, because the map says 0.5 for industrial, but it only has one designation of the kind of industrial, but there's two designations. And if you go back to the old land use map, you'll see this I-1, that had a 0.35 FAR on it. And everything else was I-2, correct, Chris?
Yeah, further into.
Yeah. And then the other property that we're talking about didn't have an industrial designation at all, it was mixed use. And if you remember, during the general plan process, the property owner came in and asked that they be allowed to reinstate the industrial zone to make their property conforming. So I think a reasonable argument would be that to make it conforming, it would have had to have had the correct FAR for it. This particular piece of property, I don't think we really discussed anything. So that's why we're asking for the clarification. The rest of Los Molinos is at a .5 FAR, so that's why staff made that recommendation. I understand, Mayor, your point
Well,
about trying to eventually meet the goal of creating.
Exactly,
mixed use.
and to the point of this being Los Molinos District, then isn't the car wash in Los Molinos District, and should we up that to 1.0? I mean, how far is this creek gonna go?
Well,
Hold on 1 second.
Jim, what is the actual FAR at that lot? And is it possible for us to say, whatever the current FAR is there, that's what the designation on that lot should be, to preclude an increased use, or is that
Well, I
something,
think that if
is
you
that
gave us
spot
that
zoning
general
there?
direction,
That does sort of sound like spot zoning. Create a zone around one lot.
It's not the intent of the general plan. I mean, we didn't create a general plan from scratch.
Actually, I
to
think yours
not
is a
create a
0.5.
whole for the community. Yeah, if you'd like to speak.
Thanks for the indulgence. Again, I guess I just would try to go back to what we did. And if you look at your land use map, I wish we could pull it up. There is only one FAR for industrial on your land use map, and it says .5. Otherwise, I would have been here then saying, look, .35 doesn't work. It's not .35, it's like .41 or something right now. There's no plan to increase it, but if there's a fire, we're out of conformance. That was the whole exercise, was to not be out of conformance. So we came and we said, we'd rather than have a mixed-use designation on that back parcel so that we're out of conformance, if we could have an industrial designation that put us in conformance and then a mixed-use overlay, that would be fantastic. They did that, they put that .5 on the map, I read it, .5, life goes on, life's good. That's what it says. I don't know where the idea, I guess the way they've got the idea that there's a .35 designation is because
Well,
there was
Mr. McGuire, I
another.
think the issue is not with the 0.5, it's with the 1.0 or the 2.0. So you're not here to ask for 1.0 or 2.0 FAR, you're just saying 0.5.
Just .5 for the industrial.
There we go.
For the industrial.
Okay.
Then with regard to the mixed-use overlay, that was.
That's a separate.
It's a separate issue.
Fantastic.
So
Thank you for the
that's-
clarification.
That's the question. And just to clarify one thing, Councilwoman Ward, because there was never any zoning in North Beach, this is just a historical thing, properties that came through in the last 20 years, they would go back to their underlying zoning so that you store it property, the FAR, the site coverage that they were allowed when they came in was 1.0. They, up to a 1.0 FAR was in effect, was what they could do. Now, the current general plan, I think the FAR under the current general plan is 0.5. Perhaps it's 0.35 for that parcel, but I know when we came in, we asked for that 0.5. It was granted, and tonight you'd be changing it to something different.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm comfortable with 0.5 industrial, if that's.
That's fine.
Okay. Okay. I'm good with that.
Yeah, that's what it reads.
Okay.
You're good with A and B?
Hold on. Let me pull that up.
It says amend to clarify that the industrial land use has an FER 0.5 and amend the maximum FER for the MU overlay 2.0.
Okay. This is where I'm gonna, I think, have an issue. So A is fine. I'm okay with A. The MU for an overlay of 2.0, so that since we made the previous change, the frontage along ECR is now gonna be 2.0?
correct.
Okay.
Why 2.0? Because it's in the back?
No, the frontage is gonna be because of the last vote we just,
Oh, that's right.
yeah.
It's just the lot coverage.
Yeah.
I want to mention a little bit of what's motivating this is you have different citations in the new general plan that say conflicting things. And going through in a computerized mapping, what I'm doing is I'm updating the maps, right? To give the public good information. And in the process, I'm noticing some discrepancies, like in the old general plan, it says I-1. So there's a question mark had, well, where is this coming from? This is being motivated to ensure that there's no confusion, so that when we move forward and we do the zoning ordinance update, we're doing what the council wants. So I just want to make that very clear. There's no other motivation. As for this, the idea, the overlay and the 2.0 FAR, I want to clarify that this area right here used to be 2.0 FAR, mixed use. Now, if I go back to the previous slide, you're going to see that This is the mixed-use overlay, right? This part right here is a 2.0 FAR. So essentially, the council's being asked whether the FAR of the entire overlay should match what the FAR used to be for that part. Is that clear?
Yep. Did someone make a motion in a second? Okay.
I'll second, and that is for initiation purposes.
Yeah. Motion by Brown, second by Downcheck. All in favor? Aye. Pass 5-0.
I have a question about the high density, about this mixed use and high density residential. Does this create non-conforming uses in these cove and these properties around there? If we were to zone this high density residential, I guess that's the thing that it really came out. I remember very clearly this whole conversation, the GPAC, about this area, this use, you know, exactly what we're talking about here. But the question is, how does this impact the existing uses of the properties along Coronado?
And we're not proposing to change any of this area right here, which is the frontage along Victoria and Del Mar. It's this back frontage on Coronado that would change, so it doesn't affect any of these properties here. It was news to me to hear that there's a hotel on that street, because I think it's really more of a weekly vacation rental, which actually isn't precluded by high-density residential zoning. So I don't know if there's any case where there's really a creation of a non-conforming use by changing that. But I really don't know the history of the lot that's the property owner wrote in about Mr. McKinley. I'm not sure whether that actually is a legal hotel. First I've heard of it, frankly. So.
Well, Tim, I don't know how much you recall from the GPAC discussions, but it was pretty clear that medium density or high density residential.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was just the idea. The idea at some point, folks, was that this whole street would be more of a, you know, kind of have shops and tourist serving destinations. That was created in the 1993 general plan, and that never came to fruition. And we just basically recognized what the existing use is, which is this this high density residential use. So that was the entire discussion. Kind of started and ended there.
And just to clarify, the mixed-use zone here now allows all residential to occur, if, you know, that's so the choice of the property owner. And the Planning Commission had recommended that just allowing the opportunity to go either way with it. Probably the only thing that could even be conceivable to work on that street would probably be a hotel type of a use, because the retail just doesn't have the functionality, and that's why staff was recommending. If you look at the character of the street and just look at what is the planning potential here, and, you know, would retail even work here at all? Would that be unreasonable for the residential people that live there? Then how would you even actually create the parking, because the retail would be on the first level there? So it just didn't make a lot of sense to retain that aspect of it.
Which direction are you going, Tim?
High density residential.
Just that recommendation.
Second.
Whoa. Okay. Motion by Brown, second by Ward, to move Coronado to high density residential. All's in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Initiate. Sorry, thank you. Any opposed?
Jeff is very vigilant about initiating.
5-0.
We're only initiating things here.
It's my contribution.
Can we discuss 5B before we discuss 5A? I feel like that would be a much easier way to go. Okay. So 5B, amend mixed use 3.1 land use to be medium density residential. If there's no discussion on this, I'll just move that item. Yeah.
That's a very good idea. I'll second that.
Okay. Motion by Ham, second by Baker. All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye. To initiate. Any opposed? It's 5-0. Okay. 3.1A. This one to me is I thought was clear. This is one of the items that I had with previous staff. Is that El Portal to me just seems like spot zoning. It's a location that's a commercial use on both sides currently. It's a commercial street, ECR. We don't want to encourage a mixed use designation in that area. That's not what we're going for. That's not what this community needs in that location. It needs to be commercial. It's a commercial hub. I think it's a bad idea to even have a mixed-use overlay there to even entice somebody to come in with that sort of project. So to encourage a residential use to be right adjacent to a tire shop doesn't seem correct to me. So I'm going to move that we initiate no mixed-use overlay on the east side of ECR.
You're going to amend MU 3.1 on the east side of ECR to NC2?
Yes.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Motion by Ham, second by Baker. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, passes 5-0. Okay, 6. I think let's do B first, also on this one. So some discussion on item B for the height standard. So can you go over in detail what the height reductions will be?
So it shows here that one of the things that was discussed, I think, is because the same height recommendation is for the next portion we're going to talk about. We're not actually suggesting that you reduce the height to 30 feet if you're doing a 3-story building. It's 42 feet. So there's nothing to preclude getting a higher heights if you're doing a 3-story building if you tuck it under, just a note. In this particular case, we're using our model after the building that was referred to probably 50 times during our kind of ideal scale for downtown. And when we started looking at the height of that building, you can see it's very beautifully designed and it has full roofs, and somehow they managed to be able to fit 2 stories within 30 feet on the front of that building. And actually, it's slightly lower than that. The main building is 27.8 feet, so we left it 30 to give a little bit more flexibility. Then as you step down or go down, as the topography increases or lowers and the building height increases, you go up to a height of, I believe, what is it there, 40.6 feet, 40.5 feet. And so we decided, well, let's just make it a little bit more realistic for the scale that we were trying to achieve and lower the height limits slightly to reflect that. And again, I think it's going back to our desire to guide developers to a project that we think that the community wants to see, so we don't get any surprises as we get further down, the process.
Well, Jim, let's talk a little bit about what is the use in the bottom floor of that building right on El Camino Real?
I believe it's retail.
Surf shop.
It is.
And if I recall, the ceilings inside that surf shop are very high. So is that an actual apartment on the second story there? Because it seems to me like
Well, the second story, okay, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about down here where Schmidt's Chocolate.
No, I'm talking about the front,
Yeah,
right
this
on
is
El Camino Real.
The surf shop right here, which does have pretty high ceilings, I believe, and up here it's transitioned. At one time it was residential, and now it's an office use up above.
But, I mean, I've been in that surf shop. The ceilings are tremendously high. How can there be a apartment above that? That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, if you look at it, if you have a 12-foot high ceiling, and then you have, let's just say 2 feet for the floor area, and you have 10 feet, now you're at 24 feet. And if you have a 3 to 12 pitch, which that is, you can go back, almost 20-some feet before you hit the ridge. So there's room there.
Okay, thanks.
So how would you apply this policy on other lots down Delmar, for example? I mean, how does this work here? I guess I'm trying to understand the application of these principles. Is it based on topography? I mean, how is it that we're translating this into other lots?
Well, on Del Mar, you have a 2-story height limit, so it would be the bottom part. And there's special provisions in your code to allow a 3rd story when you have topography to allow it slip under. So we'd have to work on the standards. You know, we're getting general direction now, and we'll work on specific development standards and how that all works. But basically, this would apply the 2-story, 3-story to a sloping line. On a flat lot, you would really just be doing the 2-story version of it.
Okay, great.
Jim, can you refresh my memory on storied setbacks? You know, we had quite a bit of conversation about the wedding cake kind of a setup, which is one of the reasons that the Hotel San Clemente is so successful and so forth. Do we, anywhere in the general plan, how are we talking about the setback from 1st story to 2nd story to 3rd story in this area? And also, it's for item 7 also. And if you could go to your slide 21.
Slide 21,
and
okay,
kind of
let's
talk to me from that slide. And the reason for the question is canyonization, kind of the monolithic approach of, you know, having 3 stories or whatever heights we decide we're going to go with tonight.
We don't have, right now we haven't gotten to the zoning code portion, but in the general plan we have policies that talk about stepping the 3rd story back. And it's, I don't remember the specific.
But not the 2nd story?
Not the 2nd story, the 3rd story. And this is actually the existing design guidelines require a 5-foot step back on the 3rd story. So that's why these have these little offsets here, just to be realistic of what the current standards say. And it's, you know, as you see on the back here where it's 3 stories, we have added that there too. But the goals and policies are more specific about keeping it in scale with the surrounding area, but they're general plan policies, so they're not specific yet. The next step is to try to work those, you know, standards out to reflect that idea of providing, you know, light angle and not overshadowing the neighbors and those kinds of things. So it'll be achieved through both standards and also through design guidelines.
So is it relevant to what we're discussing tonight at all?
Well, in the sense that we already know that through the direction that we're giving, when we do a 3rd story building, we're going to be careful to set back the building so it reduces the apparent height. A good example would be what you approved for the Sarah housing project, where that's 3rd story is, you know, offset quite a distance from the front of the street to reduce its apparent, you know, visual effect off the street.
Okay, thank you.
With that, I move that we go with staff's recommendation for
6B.
We're in 6B. Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Ham, second by Ward. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, 6A. So this is the standalone residential, and Tim and Kathy, maybe I can lean on you guys a little bit with this one. My recollection of this is that our the agency that we utilized kept bringing this idea back to the GPAC and back to the UPAC, and continually we said no and turned them down on the standalone residential on the commercial street. What is either of your recollections?
So what this was is there was always this discussion about a vertical mixed use solutions, which was vertical mixed use solutions, where we would go, you know, retail, residential, or, you know, something where it's always going up for that. And what came up on the GPAC that we discussed extensively was horizontal mixed use solutions. Not necessarily do you always have to have this thing where the residential use is always above. No, you could actually have standalone residences right next to a business, and that would be okay in this regard, where you could have a residential use right next to a commercial use. And that's just the nature of a mixed-use development. Instead of just being up, it's across. And so it allowed for, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, this is what this allows to do, is you could do a residential unit next to a commercial unit. It doesn't always have to be a retail storefront or a commercial usage.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the idea, is that it gives developers more flexibility to say, you know what, if the highest best use is property is build a residential unit here, then I'm going to do that. And it could be in the middle of 2 commercial uses, and that's just, you know, the utilization. Instead of always going up, it's to allow for a certain development, and next that could be a retail use or whatever the case may be. And then even so is that it could segue back and forth, similar to how residential converts to commercial, and vice versa. That was the idea. Jim, is that your recollection as well, where this came from, or correct me if I'm wrong?
It's the concept of letting the market try and, rather than us trying to kind of shoehorn in a mixed use in the downtown and these kind of outlying areas where there isn't the market demand necessarily for that, and you're getting, I think one of our citizens made a comment that some of those haven't been as successful as we might like them to be. Why not allow the use to be completely flexible? You know, maybe right now residential is what makes sense, but 20 years from now, you know, commercial and the market demand and the need for certain kinds of commercial uses grows and the demand switches. So plan for it today so it's easily convertible.
Well, go ahead, Kathy. Well, Jim, that's the part of this that I've got some questions about. Are you going to require people to put in some components that make it easily convertible to commercial in 20 years?
I think that's the concept, is to include some ADA accessibility requirements and other types of building requirements so that it is, you know, more easy to convert than if it were built straight as residential.
So on the one hand, we're going to allow people to build residential down there, but we're going to tell them that while you're building this residential, you also have to comply with these things to make it so that in 20 years, your heirs might want to convert this to commercial. It seems an odd place for city government to be, to me, to require people to do these things that may or may not transpire sometime in the future.
I think the idea is to ultimately realize the goal of the downtown, because the natural progression of evolution of a downtown as it grows out and expands from the central core is to, oftentimes you'll see professional offices and service types of uses outside the core. And you already see it. You see examples as it was shown in some of those photographs over here where there was already been conversions. Where is it now? These examples here where the residential has changed over time. And some other examples of residential that are standalone. The courtyard residential could someday be an office complex fairly easily if we design for it now. So that's the concept and why we're recommending it.
I get that, but on the one hand, you're showing me examples of residences that have been converted to commercial uses, and on the other hand, you're saying we should have this area zoned for solely residential so that somebody can build a residential use in here. I mean, if the market is for residential, we should let a person do whatever they want residential-wise there. I mean, not require them that in some time in the future you might want to convert this to commercial. It seems it doesn't seem like it makes any sense to me.
That actually is a good question. How would you, I mean, what requirements you put into place? If I was going to build a residence, I wouldn't be that concerned with necessarily ADA compliance, ramps, and other things like that. Not that can be converted at a later date. What would that entail, in terms of establishing it for that purpose?
Frankly, I think that needs to be worked out if we get the direction to go that way. But part of it is just the grading on the lot and designing it in a way that, typically a lot of times a developer is just going to put steps into the entrance of the front door. And if you plan for it, you can easily grade it so that you don't need the steps. So there's a number of different things that you could do if you plan for it early on and make that a requirement so it is convertible. It's a relatively new concept. Other cities, we're not the first city to think about this, but it isn't something that it's been used a lot. So frankly, I don't have all the answers now. If you give us the direction to go that way, we would look into it further and give you some specific examples. If you give us direction not to do it, we'll take that direction and go that way as well. So.
This came up on Cabrillo, where we had to approve a mixed-use project this year on it, or last year, and they had two separate units with a hidden ADA parking behind it, and then I think they said like an 1,800 square foot residence. And I didn't think it was giving us what we want is that pedestrian area and paseos to walk around. We were getting these two units there, and it was reduced parking, which Mr. Culbertson brought up. We round down on things like that, and so we're getting more crowded streets. If you look at Cabrillo and Sarah and things like that, they're pretty crowded. So my comment after the meeting was, I would have rather have approved residential for that, for Cabrillo. Because really, what are we trying to get there? You know, we're not getting that form of mixed use we want. So Jim Holloway had mentioned to me, that's a good idea, doing that, but we got to plan for it to where maybe it could convert. You know, like if you go to Pasadena, you'll see houses that are converted to law offices or doctor's offices and things like that. But a lot of them have parking. Well, they are, but none of those have parking, which I want to point out. None of those have any parking. So that's not always good to where we're going to convert houses later on. If we don't provide parking, off-site parking for them, they'll convert later on and we'll have more cars on the street or in our parking lots on that area.
I have a question before we move on off this item. Under the current mixed-use zoning designation, can you build just standalone residential?
What we did was, for the downtown you're talking about, right?
Yeah, for the area.
What we did was we
red
made
area.
accommodations for the existing residential, because as you remember, Chris, there was some issues with some homeowners that couldn't do anything with their houses and were really frustrated. So we allowed them to be treated as not a non-conforming use any longer, so they can have expansions to their existing.
And what about the vacant lots, or if you purchased a commercial lot and wanted to change it to standalone residential, could you do that?
If it's a vacant lot right now, the way it's written, it would be a mixed-use project.
Required mixed use.
Now, another thing is if you just go straight residential, you're gonna probably create a situation where if you don't put special standards in to allow the conversion to commercial sometime, you'll get driveways in the front with garages. And you're basically gonna pretty much eliminate any chance in the future without a complete tear down of a commercial facility coming in and replacing it.
So this is coming more into focus, is that what you're basically doing is putting development standards on this horizontal mixed-use application that would not create, it gives you an opportunity to develop the residential, but ultimately residential that's more in character with that same neighborhood paseo thing, just like you're saying, where you don't have a garage that you pull in and park, that ultimately have to be in the back, and just certain, it have to be minimal though, it have to be really a light touch. I mean, you could be dictating size of the hallways and things like that, just, rear parking, certain, ground level entry, I mean, maybe a handful of items, right? I mean, is that what the concept is?
Yeah, I think, well, you could go any range of those kinds of things. You could go really restrictive and require them to put things in so that someday you could make it into a restaurant and have a grease interceptor, which isn't what I'm proposing, but you could go that far. Or you could do it where something was just, like you get good site planning, so the opportunity that if you wanted to come back, you don't have to level the whole thing and you can build a commercial facility or something.
I think no matter what we decide, it has to be very light touch, very minimal standards just to try and shape that development that way.
Then, sorry, go for it.
How, if you were to build a residential unit down there, what parking would you be required to put in?
Well, it varies, but it's generally 2 parking spaces per unit. It can go up from there. So generally, you're going to have at least 4 parking spaces because they're typically 2 units at minimum.
So those would be 2 double garages?
Potentially. Or we do have provisions in our multifamily zone for these lots that are 40-foot wide to do tandem parking.
It just seems to me, one of the things that I had when we first went over this, and I know I was in the minority on this, but forcing this mixed-use urban sprawl outwards from Del Mar just didn't seem to make sense. It seems like this is a solution where we get residential, which seems to me in these outer areas to be more effective than a mixed-use project, because if you look at the mixed-use projects that Mr. Culbertson cited, they're not the best examples of what we want in our community. So this is a solution towards that. I would prefer just the deletion of the mixed use in these areas completely, but I'm in the minority there, so I understand that. The problem that I see, Tim, with your light touch is that it puts us in the same situation we're in now. If you do have a light touch, and in the future, I'm torn. I don't know. The bottom line is I don't like the mixed use designation sprawling out this far, so I would prefer a light touch. But if truly the majority wants to go with the mixed use, then the light touch doesn't accomplish the majority's goal.
I'm not against.
I'm sorry, mixed use, what do you mean?
Eliminating mixed use on that and going just residential, if that's what somebody wants to do.
Are you talking along ECR?
No. We're talking about
the
red highlighted areas. I'm in the minority, so I get it, but.
And thanks for recognizing that in terms of not just the 5, but the history of this journey.
Yeah. So I like your light touch idea because it goes more towards what I think is a good idea, but.
And listen, I think the direction provided to staff is, you know, there's maybe some additional details we need to see here, but ultimately we should allow for standalone residential on horizontal mixed-use basis, and then we also want to ensure that whatever development is done, and you know, we're allowing, it's a little bit of a new use, that if we do get a residential development coming in, that ultimately it should be done in a way that isn't precluded from future conversion, you know, and whatever that entails, but I would prefer not to have it seriously over-regulated, just a few general building standards, you know, certain type of parking, this and that, as long as it's within these parameters, you can do, you know.
The one question I will raise before you comment, Bob, is say I purchase a vacant lot in this location, and ultimately I want commercial. Can I skirt the system by saying I'm going to build a residential and do my light touch that Mr. Brown indicated, and then, oh, I'm completed, now I want to convert commercial, and guess what, I just skirted half the requirements.
No, you'd have to meet all the commercial standards that are required for any commercial building. So ultimately, that would probably cost you more, not less.
Hold on, sir. Hold on.
Sure. So it wouldn't make any sense, because if you wanted to do commercial, you would be just better off starting from, you know, that premise and designing for that. Because if you built the residential and it had less restrictive standards and you had to come back and meet the commercial standards, it would require you to upgrade it anyway. So there's no skirt around or loophole.
Okay. Bob, do you have a comment?
Well, I still think it's, you know, I think it's way overreach by us to take a light touch on that. That should be up to the property owner, do whatever they want to do there.
I think just to.
I mean, if you comply with our rules and regulations, I don't.
Just so I can clarify with you, though, you're saying not a light touch, so no touch, or you're saying heavier touch?
No, I'm saying no touch at all. You do whatever you want. If you want to build residential, make it residential. If you want to build it commercial, you build it commercial. Yes. If you want to build it something in between that you might want to do in 20 years, then you do that on your own. Don't tell people what to do. Plan for the, you know, I think that's a stretch.
So this is going back towards what I was saying in the first place, which was, can we make this, at least in the downtown area, not the upper portion, but the downtown area, an overlay as opposed to mixed-use zoning? What do you mean by that? Well, because to Bob's point, right now, most of these areas are residential areas. I mean, there's a couple offices that exist here, but for the most part, they're residential. So,
well, what I'd suggest is you do kind of a flex-use zone. If you want to allow residential outright without the idea of this convertibility, then just continue to allow commercial, mixed use, and residential independently.
Great.
Well, but we haven't done that in the past, just for clarification. Right now, as it exists, if you want to build residential.
It's mixed use or
commercial.
Nothing.
Yeah, it's mixed use or nothing.
I think it's fine with what Bob said, just standalone residential works fine.
Right, so we're deleting
So,
designed with flexibility to convert to commercial use.
Yeah.
Okay. So any of the three, just for clarification.
And if at some point they decide to convert, well, then you bear the cost of the conversion, so that's
Yeah.
fine.
So should it read, amend the MU3
No.
to clarify the intent to allow standalone residential, comma, or commercial? Is that, Jim, what you're suggesting?
Well, you don't have to because it
don't
already
have to for
allows it.
commercial.
You don't have to, but we understand the clarity there.
So,
yeah.
Okay.
clarity.
So we're just stopping at residential.
We're going to create a zone
I'll move it
that allows
for
a mixed use,
initiation.
a flexible mixed use or a horizontal mixed use, we sometimes refer to it.
Or standalone residential.
It could be standalone residential, it could be standalone commercial, or it could be a mix of the two.
Great, okay. So
I love the idea of horizontal mixed use.
that's motion. Sorry, Lori, didn't mean to step on you.
That was about Brian with the Planning Center came back with that one, because there's a lot of consternation about why vertical, and he says, you know, listen, this is completely normal for people to look at a horizontal mixed-use application, so I'm fine with
Okay,
it.
so motion by Baker, second by Donchak, is that what I heard?
Sure.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Who guessed? Okay, are we on 7? 7?
I have a question, Jeff. I live in a home that is within 500 foot of this area that we're talking about on ECR, South ECR.
You should recuse yourself.
Okay, I will do so then.
From this discussion.
I own a home in a property within 500 feet, and so I'll be recusing myself.
On this discussion, one thing that I remembered on El Camino, west of the 5, it was mixed use. And then there was a lot of talk about east of the 5, if someone wanted to do standalone residential, that was fine, because there's so much of that in South El Camino anyway. Am I talking about the wrong thing?
No,
You're
you're
looking at me wrong.
well, I don't recall it being that way, but those are facts. Those are facts, what you just said. I mean, there is standalone. This is one of the ones that I was going to look to you, Tim, and you for reassurance, is that I don't think that we went for a standalone residential use on ECR. I think we, as a GPAC, we said no to that, and then when we went to the Planning Commission, it was overturned, and they said yes to that.
Okay, that's what I think I'm talking about, is on Planning Commission, what I remember is mixed use being west of the 5. With 3 stories only if you had a residential unit on top, or.
Well, let's not talk about stories yet.
No, I
Let's
know.
just discuss
And
standalone residential.
East of the 5, it could be standalone because there were so many properties that
Existing.
were standalone. It was already kind of recognizing what was there
Gotcha.
and not forcing someone to do commercial.
Yeah.
On the, retail on the bottom.
Yeah.
So that's my recollection. So for us to say standalone residential for west of the 5, that's not what I remember.
Yeah, I don't remember that being the case.
I want to state that the general plan policy LU 13.01 talks about we require standalone residential projects which are inconsistent, or we require that sites developed exclusively for residential uses are designed so-and-so. So the policy within this zone specifically calls out standalone residential. So that's why we brought the issue
Yeah,
up.
and I
But
think.
I remember that being only east of the 5.
Yeah, so my recollection is for
So
this
that policy
location.
might be for that.
And I think this is where the confusion came in, is the GPAC said one thing, Planning Commission said a different thing. So now we have an opposing viewpoint on what we want to do in this location. So it's up to us to decide, do we want standalone residential on ECR in this location? I would make the argument. that no,
I'm
we
going to
don't.
say yes, because the broader idea here is to encourage revitalization, and as one of the speakers pointed out, there's just been nothing going on for, 15 years.
And to
so-
one of the speakers' points, that had to do with FARs, not with standalone residential projects. And one of the speakers this evening is talking about a mixed-use project.
Right.
Which I think is what we're.
But this
Wow.
isn't in addition, this is not instead of. It's still mixed use with standalone residential.
I'd make the argument that's not what we want for ECR, a major thoroughfare through town, standalone residential.
I've talked to my neighbors in Southwest. They actually want something up there on those lots that they can walk to, a coffee shop or something. They're not opposed to residential being on top, or, whatever. But
Integrated.
they want something there, around Valencia and all of that. And I asked them specifically about standalone residential. What do you think of that? And they were like, no, we want some things up there. We don't want to just have
Yeah.
residents, those are all single-family residents.
But the point, I hear that point loud and clear, but we don't get to dictate what goes in there. It's a developer that has to come in and see an opportunity. And so if the object of the exercise is to encourage revitalization, I think we want to be a little more broadly tolerant of what might fit.
I think I would make the exact argument, or opposite argument, in that that's what got us to the situation we're in now, with a lot of the projects being too tolerant. I think we want quality projects that are being brought to the
Sure,
city.
we want quality.
But I don't think we want standalone residential quality products. I think
Why
we want.
not?
Because this is a major thoroughfare through town. I mean, this is a commercial district.
That's right, it's got a bus route, so you can get to your job, it's, got easy freeway
And you can
access.
you can still have your
It's got a
residence
grocery store
with
down the
commercial
street.
space.
I mean,
It just doesn't seem to me that we want to encourage a residential use on ECR, a sole residential use along ECR.
There'll be parking, stopping, pulling.
It just doesn't fit with the community.
I got a question for Mr. Pett just before we go any further. I'm concerned about how close I am to this also, Jim. How far is it from, how far is this project from Ola Vista?
From Ola Vista?
Yeah.
1,000 feet.
I think I think you're well out of the 500-foot
Okay,
distance.
thank you. Just clarifying
Hey,
for the
that's-
record,
hey,
just.
Mr. Golf, you should know how far 500 feet is.
I know, I live halfway down Lobos Marinos, and I'm not in this area. I'm outside of it.
So it sounds like I'm going to move that we don't allow standalone residential uses on ECR We don't initiate the change to allow standalone residential uses.
Only in this.
Yeah, we're just talking
Western
this
side.
area that we're cited
Yeah.
in here. Yeah.
I'd second that.
Number 7. Okay. Motion by Ham, second by Ward. All's in favor? Aye. All's opposed? 3-1. Doncheck opposed. Okay, the next item. Amend the land use standard for west side of El Camino Real and specify height limit of 2 stories along ECR. So this one, you're looking for clarification on, can you pull up the slide that references this? So it's my recollection that the thought behind this was the diagram on the right side of the page, not the left side, and that it's 2 stories frontage on ECR on the west side, and then on the alley, you have the potential to go 3 or more in the alley side because you take advantage of the topography. That's the direction that I think Planning Commission, GPAC, everybody, City Council had all intended to go with this. I don't think there's ever a question that we wanted 3-story along the frontage of ECR. Any discussion on that? Sorry. Yeah.
And I'd like to clarify that from Cadiz down, it was actually, there was a lot of talk in GPAC that it was only going to be 2 stories, because it was a view corridor, and all of that. We didn't want to block the view from the freeway and go high, like you said, 3 stories. But then there became a discussion in Planning Commission that because of the topography, we could slip a 3rd story under if the topography allowed that. So, absolutely. But I think it's clear in all the writing that I saw that it says it's only 3 stories on the alleyway.
Oh.
That we were only ever looking at 3. We never imagined anything would be more than that in any of these lots. And the 3, that was like an allowance that we kind of put in towards the end, that they could put the 3rd on the back. And we were kind of thinking with Planning Commission that would be parking in the back. Say, if it was commercial on the bottom, retail or whatever it is, mixed, residential on top with parking behind on the alley is kind of what we were thinking. We weren't thinking that would be another floor. It might be a garage, but nothing more than that. Because I know we talked about design guidelines for those 3 stories with the alley, with the homes, adjacent to the alley. But I just want to clarify that it was pretty, everyone was only talking 3 stories maximum in the back.
I get that, and I heard those discussions also. The part of that that nobody thought of was, what if somebody digs down? Why should we care if somebody wants to spend the money to dig down for a 4-story or burrow down and do underground stuff there? Why should we care what's on top? I mean, beyond FARs and too much density, we'll of course be cognizant of that, but the above ground portion is going to be the same. So do we really care if somebody digs down for a 4th story there just because it is a 4th story?
The only thing that we talked about, and the reason why we did care, is you have an alleyway and these lots, and then you have homes residential behind them. A lot of those are only single-family homes. And the impact of 4 stories, we were talking about design guidelines just to minimize 3, when we were thinking it would just be 3 stories, that those people would see. That's a wall straight up. So if you give them to where they could dig down like that, they're going to see 4 from where they're at. It is below grade, I understand that, the topography. They're going below the elevation of the current elevation, right? When they dig down, they're going below current elevation. And they're allowed to do 3 stories at the current elevation.
In the 2 scenarios that you see there, we're talking about digging into the slope so that you get what's basically a basement level right here. Usually what that is, you're right, Commissioner Ward, council member, sorry.
I'm so used to that too.
Well, we were on planning commission for a long time.
It didn't even register.
That you dig in here and you get basically a basement level, which is typically a parking area.
Kathy, I see what you're saying with the thought,
impact. It's impact.
I get the impact. I don't think on GPAC when we discussed it, we imagined somebody digging down. But to me, I think I've shared Bob's sentiments in the fact that as long as the height and the overall experience for the pedestrian isn't impacted, I don't see it as being a distraction if somebody would like to do that. I mean, obviously, we're not going to let somebody build a skyscraper 100 feet down, because the density of that would be overwhelming for the community.
Be beyond the FAR limit.
Yeah.
Well, when you consider that, if you're adding, the more FAR you add, you know, the more density you're going to have. It's going to, so where are the cars going to go?
Well, I think they're going to go below grade, and that's why they're going to dig. You're still going to have to be required to have 2 spaces per residential unit and whatever the
But I think
it
was never imagined that there would be, we always, when we talked about it in Planning Commission, we always envisioned that 3rd story being the parking, and then 2 on top. Right. And so we were trying to mitigate what people would see from the back.
I get that, Kathy, but maybe I'm not being clear. In that drawing on the right there, over on the right where you see 3 stories and the 3rd story's got half full of dirt. Well, imagine that 3rd story going down 1 more story, and that dirt still stays in the same place. I mean, right there, yeah, go up, Jim, to that corner, the other corner. Yeah, right down, right there. That corner is still going to be that corner if that's the street right there. If just to the right of that is the street's not moving. You're just going to go underneath. You're going to go down. So the impact and the visual from the street is still going to be the same. I mean,
alley height is still gonna
It is, but I'm just asking you to consider the density of what you're putting in on the alleyway. Whether you're going to have people accessing those properties from the alleyway, you're turning that alley into, instead of an alley, more into a roadway. You're having cars going in and out.
Well, people will be getting to their garages there, of course.
Right.
Of course, yeah. I mean.
Well, and here's the thing that, to your point, Kathy, about the density, I think is what we've done as a council is reduce the density of this area by requiring only 2 stories as opposed to 3 stories, because we would have the same density, but because we lessened it on the top, on the ECR lot, now we're moving it to the backside. And so we're creating the same density we had before, actually maybe a little bit higher because we're changing the FARs, but we're doing it in a way that's more visually effective for the community. It creates a better product at the end of the day. So
It creates a bigger product.
it does.
But that's what you have to decide you want to do, because when we first started out with the planning center, all of those lots were just 2 stories, never any talk about 3. And GPAC was pretty adamant about that. And then we started talking about, okay, we can tuck 1 in the back. So we were only ever talking about 3 stories. And I know you're talking about underground.
Yeah.
But if you increase the FAR, you are going to have more density in there. And I just want you to think about the alleyways and the impacts to the people behind of all the cars going through there.
Well, one of the cool things about this opportunity is if we do have a development that comes along in an alleyway, if the current condition of the alleyways is pretty poor, so if we can get a better, more utilized alley out of a project like this, it could be a good thing for the community. So I know one of the things that we talked about on GPAC and in the general plan was having the alleyways be a bicycle route. And currently with how deplorable alleys are, they're not a very good bicycle or pedestrian route. But with a project like we're discussing, we could have a usable alley.
You could, but you have to think about visitor parking also.
Well, and I think that's part of the requirement of all this stuff. And that's how you achieve,
that.
So.
It's just not what I remember our intention ever being. We never thought about digging out. So I'm just a little concerned about that, because you get a bigger, higher density project.
Well, we're getting a project up to the maximum FAR, which is what the person who owns it's allowed to build, right up to the maximum FAR, and not 1 foot beyond it. So whether he chooses to dig down or not, it's still going to be the maximum square footage they can get on that lot. What is going to be the FAR in that zone?
It's 1.5, and just keep in mind that as you go down a level of parking, exponentially the cost increases. So they're not going to go down unless there's a reason to do it. And so I wouldn't anticipate going down a second level on many of these, if any, especially at the 1.5 FAR plus the 2-story level off of El Camino Real.
Okay.
So the concept here, just so I'm clear that where you're going with this, is the second scenario, maintaining a 2-story look from El Camino Real, but as you go down toward the alley, allowing the ability to have a third story or third level.
Yes, also known as staff's recommendation B.
That too.
The only thing I need clarification on, Jim, is the heights that we have going here. I got the chart from last week and the chart from 2 weeks ago, the chart from this week, and just so I can, if I'm reading this correctly, you can go higher without residential than you can with residential?
Is that?
Because they're both the same. I mean, there's no change, but it says 2 stories without residential, top of roof 33 feet, 2 stories, and then just says 2 stories. It's 30 feet. So that would be assuming with residential, it's 30 feet.
Yeah, and that, what staff's recommending is some potential wording changes there to clarify the development standards are different depending on what the development faces, whether it be El Camino Real or the alley.
Yep.
And getting away from with residential or without residential.
Okay, so that's the clarification.
So just focusing on what you see versus, yeah.
That's why, okay, that makes sense. So you're gonna come up with appropriate heights for ECR.
And not only that, but
An alley.
the way that this is situated right now is it actually allows, it has different density standards, so a 1.0 FAR without residential
Okay.
and a 1.5 with residential. What staff's recommending is something similar to the downtown area outside the core where it's based on the lot size. So if you have, which this really is consistent with other areas of the city. My main point is if you have a larger lot that's like 12,000 square feet or larger, then maybe you can have the 1.5 FAR. If you have lots smaller than 12,000 square feet, then you would have the 1.0 FAR. So it's, again, not based on the use, it's based on the site conditions.
Got it. Okay. Great.
So I'm moving that we initiate a general plan amendment 7B, which is staff's recommendation to amend the MU land use standard for the west side of El Camino Real to specify height limits to 2 stories along ECR and 3 along the alley.
Second.
City council noted underground parking doesn't count against the FAR. Okay.
So I guess, oh,
All in favor?
Yeah, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-0.
and then I guess just to wrap up the whole council package, we are initiating a general plan amendment to clean up errors and ambiguities and make other changes as directed by city council tonight. And we'll be initiating a general plan amendment and clarify land uses for the 7 areas as directed.
I got one more question for Mr. Wright and Mr. Petches. Have we missed anything?
No, you got it all.
I'll go get Tim.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Hi, Tim.
Hey,
Let's see. Unfinished business? None? Okay.
Okay, next item is a report from the Public Works Director, City Engineer, concerning the possibility of amending the code of the City of San Clemente to allow utility annual encroachment permits for utility companies when conducting routine work associated with existing utilities in the public right-of-way.
Good evening, Mayor Ham and City Council members. Tom Vonnegut, excuse me, Assistant City Engineer. So I'll be brief. I don't have a PowerPoint. The item here tonight is to request your council approval to allow the city to issue annual encroachment permits for certain utility-related work. Through his involvement in the Association of California Cities Orange County, Councilmember Brown informed staff of the association's efforts to come up with a proposed model permit that they would like local agencies to consider. So staff did review that permit, as I noted in or that model permit in the report. We also contacted and reviewed similar permits of other agencies who already have something like this in place, tried to take the best of the best, and put together a draft permit, which we do think is appropriate for use in San Clemente. The report, I won't repeat it, but it outlines the types of smaller routine projects we think are appropriate for coverage under an annual permit. It does have conditions so that we can still make sure that we strike a good balance between reducing a lot of the permit processing time that occupies not only time on the utilities but our staff, but still we're able to inspect these projects and make sure there's proper traffic control, that work's done safely in the public right-of-way. So, with that, I'll be happy to answer questions, but we do recommend that you approve and introduce this ordinance that allows the Public Works Director to be able to issue these kind of annual permits. It's intended to be for the typical utility companies you would expect, gas, electric, phone, cable, communications, things like that. People who have, or companies who have facilities in the right-of-way. I will make one minor change. I noticed a hanging chad, a thought. I would like, my recommendation would be to approve the ordinance as you have it, except striking the last 4 words at the end of paragraph A, which actually sits at the top of page 9A-9 in your report. The sentence should end right after the word permit. Those 4 words were a leftover thought. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Perfect. We have 2 cards on this item. So Kristen Camuglia.
And Tom, just to clarify, the staff recommendation in the blue agenda, that's correct then?
Except to modify.
Where did you?
It's in the report.
In the
so with
what
modifications,
what
9A.
page?
So I'm proposing on page 9A-9 of your report. The end of the paragraph at the top of the page ends with "on newly resurfaced streets." Those 4 words I'd like to strike. They actually conflict with what we want to do.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Okay. And then following Kristen will be Dwayne.
Honorable Mayor and council members, say good evening. My name is Kristen Camuglia, Government Affairs Manager for Cox Communications. I'm here tonight to speak in support of this item. I want to acknowledge the efforts of ACCOC for really bringing this matter to the forefront on a countywide level, and certainly acknowledge the efforts of Councilman Brown for bringing this forward to your council for consideration. As your staff report states, we feel that this proposed language strikes a very good balance, and it's an example of really good governance, and it's really intended for the smaller routine projects, but also ensuring that they meet all the applicable safety and technical standards and minimizes disruption to roadway users. So again, I'd like to just reiterate that Cox Communications is supportive of this item. We do thank your staff for being very responsive to our questions during the development of the language of this ordinance. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for sticking around. Dwayne?
It's been lots of fun, too. Thank you, Dwayne Cave, External Relations Manager for San Diego Gas and Electric. Mayor Ham, council staff, thank you very much for having me here today. I want to say that San Diego Gas and Electric is also in support of this annual permit. We think that anything we can do to take small projects, maintenance, and inspection projects, and not go through a bureaucratic process of a permit every single time is good for the city, it's good for the utilities. San Diego Gas and Electric has been a long-time advocate of annual permits. This is very similar to ones that we are using in other places, like your neighbor in Dana Point. And so we're very happy that Councilmember Brown and the ACCOC has brought this forward, and want to say that we support it at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for waiting around.
It has been a lot of fun.
Any discussion on this item?
I've got one question for Tom. Will the city still be notified with every project that's done?
Yes, absolutely. And we have that provision in the draft permit, or the proposed permit, and so there is a notification process. That's really important to us, and one thing we'll be looking as we kind of, learn how this process works. We've tried to make that simple too. It wasn't included in your packet. It's a simple 1-page form that can be emailed to our staff. The notification period's anywhere between 2 and 5 business days, depending on the type of work. It's laid out in the permit, so that we know where the utility companies will be, so our inspector can make sure that they're set up appropriately and doing work in conformance with the permit. So yes, there is notification.
I'm sure you're going to be, but I would encourage staff to be meticulous in this regard, because these are important public safety issues, and I'm always conscious of that when I'm driving around town. I always see very safety conscious folks in the streets, but I want us to continue down that. I want us to continue to do that. So I would urge staff to be very meticulous in that.
And I can assure you we will, this is, if any area of concern we had about this was just to make sure that we get proper notifications so we can make sure that these projects are inspected and observed. And we will certainly notify the utilities of our expectation and see how well that works.
Thanks, Tom.
Mayor, can I say a word about this ordinance?
absolutely.
Thank you. So, you know, the genesis behind this was ultimately, I felt as if this is a tremendous value for cities that implement it, because there are certain permits that have been pulled and have been pulled since the beginning of time that are the exact same work, exact same process, but they go through the same permit process that anybody does at the counter. And so ultimately, for a city, on a cost basis, is completely neutral. The fees don't change that the utilities pay. The difference is that it allows for staff time allocation to maybe be shifted more towards resident-serving projects as opposed to having dedicated any time towards the utilities that may not need it. And so ultimately, I think it allows for, just in terms of a good governance basis, allows us to be more resident-focused in our planning and public works departments that handle these items. And for some of these, you know, these projects that ultimately have been something that's been repeated over and over again, they have very specific guidelines. And if we find any point that a utility is not adhering to that, we can take this away as well. So it's not something once you grant it, it's done forever. If we find that there's any abuses or anything that happens, then it's something that can be retracted until we feel it's being addressed. But ultimately, it's something that was a collaborative work. We actually had city planners from Newport Beach, from Orange, from Anaheim, Lake Forest. Bill Cameron also provided input from City of San Clemente, and so it was a real balance between those interests. And they put forth a series of principles that each city can take the best of it or leave other things on the table that didn't feel applied, and that's exactly what this is. So I'm very supportive of it. I'm grateful that the staff has come up with something I think is going to be good for the city, and I'm optimistic of how it's going to provide a little bit more efficiency.
Yeah.
Be happy to move it. Yeah. I move that we introduce ordinance number 1592, entitled an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Clemente, California, amending section 12.20 of the San Clemente Municipal Code to include a new subsection 12.20.025 to allow the issuance of utility annual encroachment permits.
Second. Motion by Brown, second by Ham. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Do we have any cards for Proclamations Part 2?
I do not.
Okay.
City manager,
No reports.
city attorney,
No report.
Okay.
council members.
Okay, Kathy.
I think in December, I brought up to the council that I wanted to agendize the item for human signage.
Oh.
And I've been informed that we must take a vote on that. So again,
Okay.
I would ask the council, I would move that we agendize human signage.
I'll second that. Okay, motion by Ward, second by Ham. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Passes 5-0. Great. Bob?
Nothing.
Lori?
I've got two items. One is a PowerPoint invitation here. And if you're watching from home, the San Clemente Friends of the Library is having their 15th annual Meet the Authors Luncheon. I'm going to wait until that gets on there we go, it's on the screen. All right. It's Valentine's Day. It's Saturday, February 14th at the Laguna Hills Marriott Resort and Spa. And it's $60 a person, which includes a lovely lunch and 3 authors. It's usually a sold-out event, so if you call tonight, you should still be able to get a ticket, which is 949-493-5504. And hoping to see a great turnout. This event usually sells out, and the authors are extremely entertaining. I plan on going, and I know Councilmember Ward is also planning to attend. So that was my first item.
What time does it start at?
I think 11:30.
It starts at 11:30?
Yeah. Well, actually, that's a real good question. At 11:30, you can meet the authors, and they sit at tables, and they autograph their books, and there's a lot of socializing that goes on, and then the lunch probably gets served at 12, and it probably wraps up around 1:30 or 2.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and people always ask why it's not in San Clemente, and the reason is we don't have a venue that can hold the number of people that want to go to this event. That's how popular it is.
They don't go anywhere where there's not a functioning library.
Oh, and the bookmobile is coming, so we know
Okay,
that.
now,
Yeah, yeah.
look at that.
Okay, now my second thing is, a few weeks ago, we passed a resolution regarding the spent nuclear fuel at the San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station, and there was a council member, Sherry Horn from Laguna Woods, who was in the audience. She returned to her city, and in solidarity with San Clemente, they passed a resolution very similar to ours, and I thought I would share a copy of it with each of you, and just to know that another city in our county is supportive of our position on the nuclear power, nuclear waste at Songs. And that's all I've got.
And I got nothing, so.
Yeah, this previous, I believe it was Wednesday evening, we met with the community engagement panel and then the bipartisan policy center, and we had some extensive discussions. It was streamed online. I believe Kathy watched a portion of it. And there was quite a bit of discussion from a number of experts, local residents about, what the potential solutions are for fuel storage. The next day, the members of the CEP also met on a day-long session regarding some of the options that are available to us. I think the takeaway that I had from that is that ultimately, there are solutions that can be had. It may take more initiative on the part of the states, but also takes some initiative on the part of our elected officials to have the federal government step up to their responsibilities. Ultimately, it was a very informative session. There was quite a bit of engagement, and we were grateful that the Bipartisan Policy Center came down and was able to allow for that type of venue, because ultimately it's been very frustrating to get any movement whatsoever on this issue. And so it was nice to hear that it's not just simply a local issue. This is a national problem. But potentially there are solutions out there, and we'll continue to follow up on that. And as a member of the CEP, that will, perhaps we can find something that will work for San Clemente, and ultimately find a place for the fuel that we have on site to be relocated to a more appropriate place. So that's it.
Okay. With that, I move that we adjourn to the next regular council meeting, which will be held on February 17, 2015. The council chamber is located at 100 Avenida Presidio, San Clemente, California. Closed session items will be considered at 5 p.m. The regular business meeting will commence at 6 p.m. A subsequent adjourned regular council meeting will be held on February 24, 2015 at 4 p.m. to consider a long-term financial plan, quarterly report, and mid-year budget adjustments.
Second.
Motion by Ham, second by Baker. All in favor? Aye. Good night. Passes 5-0.